Hello everyone and welcome to DC9111 0x03 Safe Mode event, and we all are here on 27th of June 2020, the last weekend of this month, and I hope you all are doing amazing during this lockdown and the COVID-19 situation. This is your host TX, co-founder of DEFCON Delhi Group and the current leader for the same. So let's get started with a little bit of introduction of who we are. So we are just a group of techies. Some of us have secure cybersecurity as a full-time job. Some are just students and some are there just to explore this field and this domain but have nothing to do with cybersecurity. But these people in the team are way too good with the things they do that has proved to be way too helpful for DC9111 to run smoothly so far, and we're just trying our best to spread a word about cybersecurity and bridge the gap between the top-notch speakers from the industry and the people who are very keen about learning but cannot spend a lot of money or even a little amount of money, as we all belong to middle class families. So here the events that we host are totally free for all. Even the physical meetups are free for all, and no money is taken, no fee is taken from any attendee whatsoever. Coming to the audience portion, we highly encourage everyone with a doable computer science background to join our events, as who knows, it may end up being very interesting for you. All you might be looking for is just a kickstart. And security researchers are welcomed as well, as I personally believe that the talks in our event can help you level up with what you are into inside this infosec domain. Coming up next with the speakers, we have John Hammond, Cody Bernardy from Blackburn Security, Adib Nagrajan from First American in India, Emma Heffernan from EdScan, and she's also a scholar herself. Lastly, we have Alexis Ahmed, founder and CTO and instructor at Hackersploit Academy. Upcoming, we have the order of the talks. So we have John Hammond, followed by Cody Bernardy, Adib Nagrajan, then Emma Heffernan, followed by Alexis Ahmed as our final speaker. Coming up next to who we are, so here I am, founder and current team leader of DEFCON Delhi Group, DC9111. There goes my full name, and you can find that on LinkedIn as well, which is highly ill pronounced, so you can just call me TX. Also, the people have been asking about the nickname, so this has been given to me by one of my old mentors while I was working on a personal project that had a lot to do with TX and RX power of T-Link routers. So that's the whole story and existence behind the name. Not a big fan of giving myself the tag of security researcher, even though I did that when I was unemployed as a bug bounty hunter. But as of now, I talk C++, and everything I do is into malware analysis, a bit of DevOps, did a few consultancy projects as well, plus my employer will hate it if I mention their name. So this is it for me as of now. Here's the core team of DEFCON Delhi Group, in which we have Harsh Trivedi, and I would like to thank more than 20 of our volunteers who had helped this event possible. So coming back to Harsh, Harsh is our web developer, has a lot to do with fast and web development, cracks a lot of zero-weighted jokes, so you can just smile on his lame jokes to cheer him up a little bit. For the management lead, we have Adit Rai, has a lot to do with cryptography and forensics and CTFs. We have Mukul Kantiwal as our advisory. You can just Google his name and get an idea of who he is. Also, you'll get to know about an amazing course that he has just followed on called API hacking. He has just released it, so don't forget to check it out if you wish to. And I've been receiving a lot of reviews for the badges, the lead design and all. So Anushka aka 11 is the real face behind the design. Heading to the CTF overview part, special thanks to the SEC Army for their contribution to the 0x03 CTF, or 0x03 CTF as you all say. Here's the whole list of challenges category. We have miscellaneous challenges, cryptography challenges, reversing, web, forensic and POM challenges. Upcoming, we have the announcement of the CTF prizes. So special thanks to Hack the Box for sponsoring the 0x03 CTF for the prizes of the top 3 winners. So for the first one, we have Hack the Box VIP membership for 1 complete year. For the rank 2, we have 6 months of Hack the Box VIP membership, and for the third rank, we have 3 months of Hack the Box VIP membership. Also, this is the social media and contacts. We are DC_9111 on Twitter and Instagram that we forgot to mention. You can mail us with the ideas and CFPs and everything that has to do with us on mail@defcon9111.org. On the Discord, you can follow the given link. All the links will be provided in the description. Also, don't forget to follow us everywhere on the social media so that you can get all the updates and it will help us grow as well. So coming to the questions that we were being asked a lot since the announcement of DC9111 0x03 safe mode event, that do we accept donations? Yes, we do. So this is the link to the PayPal ID you can see on your screen, and under that we have the UPI ID as well, so you can donate to us if you wish to and help our cause and help us bring in more people in the physical events, as we have registrations of over 1600 people from 10 plus countries for the online event, and for the physical events we get like 300 to 500 or something responses, but we have to respond to only and only 320 to 350 people, as we cannot bear the cost of all the attendees. So if you wish to help our cause, you can donate to us. And so adding in the final comments, all the talks and all the presentations, not the talks, all the presentation of the talks that are being used will be available on our website. Link will be given in the description for the website, so you can check those out, and the links will be out in like 2 days or so. Also, the results for the CTF will be out at 12 noon on 28th of June 2020. So I'm very excited for the same. Let's do it.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, coming to hang out, and listening to my talk. This is a presentation. It's titled Capture the Flag, You Mean Change Your Life. So, this is a talk all about cybersecurity, information security, sharpening your skills, getting better, learning, educating yourself, all centered around Capture the Flag and how, honestly, it changed my life, and I think it can do the same for you. So, you might be asking, who the heck is this guy? Hello, my name is John Hammond. During the day, for my day job, for the actual work that I do that pays the bills, I am a cyber training developer over in the United States, doing some cool stuff with kind of their government and military side that helps create training material and learning material for our personnel. In my free time at night, I love to play Capture the Flag. I like to develop Capture the Flag problems and challenges and training sets and exercises to make people better at cybersecurity and learn new things. I also like to do a little bit of YouTube. That's kind of just a side project, a passion that I have. It's a wonderful hobby that I really, really enjoy going ahead and creating content all about capture the flag or cybersecurity or information security and stuff like that. Hopefully, maybe you might have seen me before. Some recent events that I've helped put together and create were VersetCon 2020. This year in April, we hosted VersetCon, or Virtual Security Conference, and I ran that capture the flag competition. We also had NomCon, or the NomCon CTF, that was also seemingly a great success. I helped develop developed some challenges for Pico CTF or DEF CON, the United States DEF CON, and I also built some rooms within Try Hack Me, one of the training exercises and online war games that you can practice and sharpen your skills on there. Okay, so this is a talk, right? But what are we even going to talk about? This is a quick kind of roadmap, agenda, outline, and schedule of what we're going to be discussing in this little show presentation. So what is a capture the flag? I keep saying those words, but what do they really mean? Who cares? Why do we even bother with this sort of thing? Maybe, hopefully at that point, you're a little bit interested in what capture the flag is if you haven't heard of it before, and you might be asking the questions like, well, how do I get better at capture the flag? What do I study? Where do I learn? And what else is out there, and what do we do after we're done with capture the flag or kind of that scene? So let's dive into it. Let's go ahead and jump in to the real presentation here. Let's get started. What is capture the flag? What is a CTF? So a lot of people come to me, or they might, who knows, they might come to anyone and they just say, I want to get better at cybersecurity. I want to learn cybersecurity. I want that cool job that pays X amount of dollars. It seems to do really, really well. That person is loving their life. They're having a great time. They want to be a part of that scene. They want to learn cybersecurity. So my common response to them is play capture the flag. But you might still be wondering, okay, what is a capture the flag? That doesn't answer the question. So I'm going to tell you, a capture the flag is a cybersecurity competition. It's a gamified way that you can learn cybersecurity skills, and each player or the participant, they're challenged to solve security problems by hacking into or defending computer systems and technology. The whole point is that it's a game. It's a sport. It's for fun. It's so you enjoy yourself, but it's really, really cool because it highlights and emphasizes real cybersecurity concepts, real vulnerabilities, real tricks and techniques and exploits, etc. It's just so cool because you want to play a game, right? It's fun to play a game. Maybe you're competitive with all your friends, the people in the other room, and you want to climb the scoreboard. Maybe you see yourself in that leaderboard and you say, hey, I know I can score more points and I know I can beat that person that's just above me. Or maybe I want to get 500 points no matter what that is or what that looks like. So you can solve problems, solve challenges or these tasks that are laid in front of you, accomplish all this stuff, all while having fun. That's the whole point. It's a game and you're enjoying yourself, learning new things. And that's super duper cool. So capture the flag comes in a lot of different kinds or a different flavor of the game, right? So there isn't like a strict definition or a proper term for each of these things, so I might get them wrong. Again, disclaimer, the name of these might be a little subjective. I think we can all agree that there is a Jeopardy style capture the flag, and that's kind of the most classic, commonly found all around the internet or happening all the time during the CTF season, right? The time of the year where a lot of schools, a lot of universities and colleges are getting together so that they can host their own capture the flag competition or an event or in a game. So in a Jeopardy style game, the challenges are laid out in front of you in different categories, right? Like a Jeopardy game. Maybe there's a specific category for binary exploitation or reverse engineering or web or programming or crypto, forensics, stego, OSINT, mobile. There are tons and tons of categories, and this list can go on. I'm just kind of enumerating some of the very, very common ones. But you'll see often maybe the game board that's displaying them would just it almost looks like a Jeopardy game board, right? There are different boxes for the challenges or the tasks within that category. And then in sort of like an Olympic style game with all these different events or these categories to work in, you will solve challenges or the tasks that might be worth a different amount of points. And that point value is usually mapped to how difficult the challenge is. Oftentimes with this style of game, you might find static scoring, where the point values for the challenges don't change. If you see a challenge that's worth 200 points, it's going to be worth 200 points throughout the entire duration of the competition. On the other hand, There's dynamic scoring, where maybe the first team to solve a challenge would gain all of those 200 points, but then the point value of that challenge would go down because someone else has already solved it. They got first blood, or they were able to solve that challenge before anyone else did, and that helps them in the scoreboard. That way, the more people that solve one challenge, that point value will slowly decrease or devalue or decay because maybe those challenges will be easy and a lot of people will solve them. So that point value would shrink. That means that the harder, more difficult, and complex and advanced challenges, well, those will be really high value targets, right? Because then less people have solved them and they are worth more points in a dynamic scoring competition. Some people kind of have their own different opinions on what scoring style they like. Personally, I really like static challenges because if the point value goes down on a challenge, well, I'm kind of bummed that I'm losing points for that challenge that I solved. So, totally up to you what you like, but you can often see that in a Jeopardy style competition. And Jeopardy just means, hey, we've got challenges ready and laid out for you within these different kinds of categories. Along with that, you have an attack and defense competition. Now, this is a different kind of game. This one might be a little bit more fun for some people because it's very, very active. There are different teams, there's different players, but each of those players, that team, they're given a bunch of network services. They're given a bunch of programs that are running and live and have to be maintained. They have to be accessible and available for the game to operate, for them to actually maintain their points on the scoreboard. The gimmick is that each of these network services they have are vulnerable. So they have to go ahead and patch and protect and make sure that their systems and their services are secure so that their challenges, their services aren't exploited or taken advantage of and abused by the other teams. So that way they can retain all of that uptime and service availability and what will give them points in this game. At the same time, those vulnerabilities and weaknesses and flaws that are in their software, all of the other teams, all the other players, they're going to have those exact same services, the same software. So the bugs and the flaws, the vulnerabilities that you might find that you're trying to patch and protect and defend across your services, once you know that technique or that exploit, you can go fire it off and go attack the other players. So you might gain points for, hey, keeping your services alive, defending your turf and your terrain, but also going out and attacking other players. And that's where the game kind of gets its name, attack and defense. So Jeopardy style and attack and defense competitions, those names and the terminology there is pretty well solidified. I think the community has kind of got a good, articulate, and precise name for those kinds of competitions. For other events, sometimes I've heard this referred to as like a hack quest or a boot to root event style game and competition. These are a lot of fun. Boot to root or hack quest style games are much more penetration test oriented. They're all about kind of being a red teamer or an adversary, doing some aggression on maybe a full network or one specific machine or a box where there is something vulnerable. Some computer, some system, some network, something has flaws and weaknesses, and you can exploit it, take advantage of it, abuse it, and collect flags from that system. And that is the competition, going through and collecting flags from that, and it's often a race to collect the most flags from that. That one is a ton of fun because it's very, very real world. You see a lot more stuff that is often used in penetration testing and red teaming. And if you aren't familiar with those words, totally fine. We'll touch on that in just a second. But some question you might come to me with is, okay, John, who cares? If it's just a game, well, that's not real world at all. That's not realistic. It's a game. So I counter that capture the flags are useful. They're fantastic. They're super instrumental to learning because they provide such a great way to learn. It's a game, and that's what makes it so much fun. Because we're doing actual hands-on practical stuff. You're actively working on the keyboard like an operator, right? You're doing the real things, exploiting the real vulnerabilities, finding flaws in crypto systems, or uncovering secrets and techniques used for steganography. It's not just us talking about security, right? Maybe some of the higher roles or positions you might kind of see within some job. They're a big manager, and I'm not meaning to throw shade or point fingers at them. It's just that a lot of times you might see security where it's maybe a slide on a PowerPoint presentation, or you're just pointing at numbers on a graph. You're talking about cybersecurity. I think Capture the Flag gives you real stuff to work on that's hands-on, applicable, on the keyboard. You're doing it. You're not just talking about it. And that's awesome. The fact that it's a competition, that motivates you. If you're a beginner to cybersecurity, you've got so much to learn. You're like drinking from a fire hose because there's so much out there. If you're a professional, if you've seen this kind of stuff over and over and over again, you're an expert, you're a master, you know what you're up against, well, you're still going to find really interesting, complex, and intricate challenges that will stretch you and help you learn different things. One of my favorite things about Capture the Flag is that these challenges, they're going to be alive forever. Not maybe open and accessible, but the fact that, okay, we've just encapsulated one problem. We've distilled down a vulnerability. We've captured and packaged up one mental process and idea to work through in a challenge, right? This conceptual thing that now exists and is part of one Capture the Flag competition. And soon from that, maybe hundreds or thousands of people have played that Capture the Flag, and they've written blog posts or articles on what they did to go explore and attack that challenge. So that is a bundled up, packaged, and encapsulated problem and task. And that's super duper cool, because maybe that bug in a real world scenario is going to be patched or gone away, but the mental idea behind a Capture the Flag challenge, that's its own standalone thing now. And that's going to be able to be referenced and looked back on and read about and studied, and that's super duper cool. The challenges in a Capture the Flag are eternal, and they're forcing you to do hands-on, practical, applicable stuff that motivates you to learn. They're awesome. I love Capture the Flag. I hope you guys do too. On top of that, it's real stuff. You're going to find real vulnerabilities. You might see some of the events, some of the competitions like the Real World CTF that's really bringing in actual products or systems or hardware or real things that are sold out in the real world. And you're going to be finding and abusing vulnerabilities and throwing exploits at that. Another common thing is the pwn to own competition, where you've got something in front of you, a tangible, actual thing, real world, that if you break it, if you can pwn or take advantage of that, if you can exploit it, hey man, that's yours. That prize, you get whatever you just broke into, whatever you hacked. Maybe it's a new fancy Tesla car or some crazy airplane, who knows? While there are still some of the kind of classic, well-known techniques and tactics, in the Capture the Flag scene, you're going to run into some crazy cool stuff. Stuff that might be potentially new, complex, and advanced zero-day attacks, right? Zero-day as in the world, researchers and blue teamers, defenders have had 0 days to prepare for that. They've never had any chance because it's so new. You're on groundbreaking, like you've just made history, and that this bug, this vulnerability, this flaw was never found before, or you've exploited this in a 0-day attack. Finding that and Capture the Flag, that's so cool. That's just so cool. And there is just so much out there. You're only one person, right? I'm only one person. Let's say you are just one fella, one human being, and there's a Capture the Flag going on. And there's another Capture the Flag maybe later this week or over the weekend. And there's another one the next weekend. Those CTFs, those events, those games are being created and put together by not you, right? Different people. So while you might have your own interests, you might find the things, find the technologies and the languages and the computer systems that you are really interested in and that you work with on a day-to-day basis, but all those other people that are hosting these other Capture the Flag events, they're going to have their own interests and their own passions and the stuff that they think is really, really cool and really interesting. So they're going to stretch you because you're going to get to see some of the technology that they want to showcase. And because there's just so much out there, you're going to be introduced to new things. You're going to gain exposure to all the stuff that's out there slowly, right? Maybe one event after another, and your skills start to stockpile and accumulate, and you grow. But Capture the Flag, because they're just so frequent and because there's just so much out there, it's awesome. You're going to be pushed out of the comfort zone. You're going to learn new things that you hadn't seen before, and you wouldn't normally work with those software, those hardware, those systems in any other environment. So, Capture the Flag is great for that. So, some common question that might come from that if someone is a little bit more seasoned, they'd say, okay, sure, whatever. CTFs are cool and all. Why not do bug bounty? Well, the answer to that is like, you should do bug bounty. You want to learn as much as you can, right? You want to be a sponge. You want to gain exposure to all these technologies. You want to think about new, creative, and innovative problem solving. So why not do both, Capture the Flag and bug bounty? Practice your skills and keep stretching yourself so you can keep growing. So for those of you that might not know, hey, what even is bug bounty? Bug bounty takes the Capture the Flag concept, that whole scene, and it takes away the game aspect. It's no longer just for fun or as like a competition or a sport with prizes. If you find a real vulnerability in a real corporate application or some actual maybe endpoint business software thing that's out there in the world, well, then you can get paid for that. They'll give you money because, hey, you just helped us protect our environment. You helped us protect our systems because this is a real, actual application that we use to provide services to real people in the real world. A lot of times, that means it's going to be a lot more front-end oriented, right? So a lot more websites, web security, and maybe mobile hacking between an Android app or an iPhone app. But it's real. So that means it's going to take some advanced, maybe complicated filter evasions or bypass techniques or obfuscating your payload in different ways. But to answer the real question, why should I do this instead of bug bounty or why should I do bug bounty instead of CTF? There's no real answer because that's no real question. Do both. Do as much as you can. You're all wanting to learn, right? So if you're learning and you want to know, man, how do I get better? My first advice is to read write-ups. So after a Capture the Flag competition, the players will typically write blog posts or articles on how they solved specific challenges. This is awesome. This is like the best part after a Capture the Flag competition because now your learning ramps up even more. While you're not banging your head against the wall, struggling, trying to just figure out this problem in the moment, after the fact, you can see how other people solve the challenges that you didn't. That way you learn, right? And it's totally okay. It's totally fine to go read and look up, hey, I want to know the solution to this because it just fascinated me. Look up the solution to the challenges that you did not solve, and even look up the solutions to the challenges that you did solve. Because maybe someone else solved it in a really interesting or unique way. Maybe they found some unintentional solutions, or they're using new tricks or techniques or a different tool that you haven't heard of before. That's awesome. Because now, as I said, you are just one person. You are one human being. And there are tons of CTFs out there. There are tons of technologies and software and hardware and things to learn. You're just one person, but all these other people are also learning and playing and getting better and smarter and sharper. So if they're going to share how they solve these challenges, you should go read up on how they do that. Learn all those new tricks. Learn that vulnerability or that exploit. While you're reading these, why don't you try and write your own? If you solved some challenges in a capture the flag, you should totally put out your own blog post or your article or even a video, however it's done, however you want to express it. Showcase what you learned and how you solved that challenge. That's super cool. Now, I mentioned, make a video. It doesn't have to just be a wall of text, right? Sometimes if you're reading a book, you've got some giant textbook you have to work through for school. If you're reading and there's a lot there, I know your eyes just glaze over, right? It's putting you to sleep because it's just hard to work through sometimes. If that's not your way of learning, totally fine. You don't have to read all those write-ups because right now, there's a lot of video resources. Now we've got other forms of media to showcase all this stuff. Personally, I really like YouTube. You might find it tons of others on different platforms, but I think YouTube is a great place for learning. There are a ton of content creators that will showcase different capture the flag challenges or different aspects of cybersecurity or vulnerabilities or exploits, walkthroughs, etc., etc. There's the Cyber Mentor, Heath Adams. I know he's a big guy in the scene. IPSec, he does fantastic stuff with the Hack the Box platform. Kindred Security, Live Overflow, I guess myself a little bit in there. It's awesome. It's so cool because it's just a giant, it's growing, I guess. Maybe it's not giant, but it's a wonderful community. It's kind of a family for these content creators that are showcasing what they're learning, how they're learning, and how we're growing. Not just the person at the other end of the screen, maybe not just you that's watching the videos, but even the content creators. We want to learn, and that's why we try and teach and showcase. That's one of the best ways to learn, is to try and teach it yourself. And this isn't specific to capture the flag, right? We talk about penetration testing. We talk about bug bounty. We talk about Internet of Things or industrial control systems. There's so much out there, and the internet, all of it's free, open source, because we just love that mindset and mentality, right? You can go find it online. YouTube is a great place to learn. Not just read write-ups, but you can watch video guides. Okay, so that's sort of a passive intake, right? You're consuming another person's content, or maybe you're reading their write-up or you're watching their video, but how do you actively study? How do you actively learn? What are the options that you can get better there? And to that I say, practice with war games. All those online, maybe cyber ranges that you can go ahead and attack and break into, maybe defend, patch, who knows? There are tons of war games out there that will help you learn new technologies, new systems, new vulnerabilities, exploits, techniques, maybe a different category, binary exploitation, reverse engineering, or specifically crypto. There's a lot. This is just a small list. I've kind of showcased this around between Over the Wire, the Crypto Pals challenges. Crypto Hack is kind of new on the scene. Hack the Box, obviously tried and true. Try Hack Me is turning out to be incredible in my opinion. I really love the stuff that they do there. The Sands Holiday Hack challenges. Sands puts out incredible stuff. Nightmare, I've been really learning that. I've been leaning into that more because it's pretty great for showcasing some binary exploitation and reverse engineering techniques because it's presented through the lens of capture the flag competitions. So that's super duper cool. Obviously VulnHub, Pico CTF for beginners that are trying to learn. There's just so much out there. There's always a new war game you can pick up, try and work through, and just as before, write your own write-ups. Create your own content with that. There's so much out there. You can study tons and tons of war games. If you aren't satisfied with just this list, there is an awesome CTF list that's on GitHub. If you simply Google awesome CTF, you should be able to find a good list of other resources that might help you learn and get better and practice. Okay, so what else is out there, right? We talked a little bit about penetration testing. We talked a little bit about bug bounty. Pen testing, that's going to be more real stuff for corporate networks, for an entire environment that might have potentially vulnerable machines or vulnerable boxes and things that you will need to take advantage of, or you could take advantage of. That's very real world, right? There's an outlined scope that maybe the client or the customer that is asking you to perform a red team adversarial penetration test, find out all of the security holes in our real network. That's something that you should absolutely do. Maybe that's your end goal. Maybe you want your job to be a professional penetration tester. You can do that, and I think Capture the Flag might be a great stepping stone to get into some of that stuff. Bug bounty, just as much. If you want to get paid for, hey, bug hunting or finding the bounty, incredible thing you can do with actual real world applications. Obviously, there are tons of other similar but different fields than Capture the Flag. My advice? It's you, man. You get to choose. What are you interested in? What do you like? What fires you up? What makes you get out of bed in the morning, and what do you really love and enjoy? You should explore all those different fields if you enjoy them. If you like Capture the Flag, play Capture the Flag. If you're more interested in pen testing, you can still find some of those Boot to Root or HackQuest Capture the Flags that you might be interested in. Or maybe check out Bug Bounty or focus more on the web category and Capture the Flag. All of these different fields blend into each other. They blur and start to bleed into each other and overlap in different ways. So find the stuff that you really love, because that's where the learning is going to come from. That's where you're going to get the most out of it. You're going to help yourself grow and get better. And that's awesome. Okay. Here are my lasting thoughts, right? Maybe you've played some Capture the Flag. Maybe you've done some bug bounty. You performed some penetration tests. Maybe you are in the midst of that. Maybe you're still playing. You're active. You want to keep learning more. You've got that hunger and that thirst for more knowledge. Maybe you're an expert. Who knows? Maybe you're a master and you know everything there is to know. I don't think that matters. I don't think that you need to, scale yourself or measure yourself or benchmark yourself on whether or not you're a pro or a beginner or a noob or a guru. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Honestly, in my opinion, and I've said this, I think, before, I could be doing this sort of thing for 50 years. I could do this my entire lifetime, and I would feel like I'm still a beginner, because there's just so much to learn. There's so much out there. I think one way that you can really find success, or you can find a lot of fulfillment and just really love and pour the passion into this sort of thing, is to share what you learn. Write those write-ups. Make those videos. It doesn't matter what media format you have it in. It doesn't matter if it's your blog post. It doesn't matter if it's on, I don't care, Instagram. I don't care. Share, create, produce. Everything that you learn, every new trick or tool or technique, give it to the rest of the world. Stream it on Twitch. Post it on Reddit. No matter how you do it, I want you to share and help the community grow. Not just yourself, but everyone. And that's going to help you grow even more so. This is how Capture the Flag changed my life. I don't think it's because, it's not because of skill. I'm not great or incredible at any of this stuff. I'm not the best. I don't think I ever will be. But I think if you become an active, prolific, content creator is not the right word, but a community contributor, right? All of a sudden, doors open up for you. People ask me for these talks, right? Hey, can you come hang out with us over at this DEF CON group? Hey, would you like to make some challenges for Pico CTF, one of the biggest beginner worldwide Capture the Flag? Would you like to host these CTFs for us for VersetCon or NomCon? Would you like to come to the Google Capture the Flag finals over in London? I don't even have to play the competition. I was invited to London just to be there, just to hang out, just to kind of record and interview and hang out with all these people that are doing the information security things, that are playing the Capture the Flag. And that is just unreal to me. I think it's all because I want to learn. We all want to learn. We're all trying to grow. So if I share the story, right? If I gift and give all the resources that I'm using to learn, and I I give back, I guess. I don't know, give back isn't the right word either. It's just share everything that you do, document it. And that's how Capture the Flag changed my life. And I honestly think if you do the same thing, they can change your life too. You're going to learn so much, you're going to grow, and it's going to be incredible. So if you haven't, go over to ctftime.org, find a Capture the Flag that might be running this weekend, sign up, register, go play a Capture the Flag, solve a few challenges, learn some new things, write about it, make some videos, produce and create, and just repeat that cycle. And soon, it'll change your life. Okay. Man, thank you so much. I can't say it enough. You've heard me probably time and time again just say thank you, but I am so grateful for you listening, tuning in to listen to this talk. I hope you gained maybe a little bit of nuggets, something new out of it. I know a lot of this stuff might be kind of surface level for a lot of people that are already in the scene, playing the Capture the Flag, but I want to reach out to the newcomers. I want to reach out to that person that's kind of wide-eyed, adventurous, eager, and excited to jump in. I'm excited for you because I want you to learn, I want you to grow, and I want this whole thing, information security, cybersecurity, I want it to change your life. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, everyone.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to my talk. Today we're going to be talking about doing corporate reconnaissance using open source intelligence. My name is Cody Bernardy, and we'll get into the intro in a bit. Now, before I get started with this talk, I just want to give a shout out to everyone that has helped me kind of learn what I know. I'm definitely standing on the shoulders of a few giants. Here's a few folks right here that have a lot more knowledge than I do, and I've learned from these individuals, and there's more people I just couldn't fit on here. So definitely check out all of these people I have listed right here. These are their Twitter handles, so definitely check out what they have to offer, because I just have a tiny bit of what everyone has to offer here. So who am I? I didn't put that on there because that was kind of generic, and I thought UNAME would be a little more interesting, even though it's not somewhat correct. Like I said, my name is Cody Bernardy. My hacker handle is Arco0x03. Don't ask how I got it. It's a long story. I specialize in OSINT and vulnerability management, and I can kind of combine those two skills together, and you could kind of call it cyber threat intelligence. I was at Amazon for 4.5 years, mainly doing vulnerability management. I was also in the fulfillment centers doing IT stuff and data center stuff. I was in the Army for 6 years doing cyber operations. I put an extra C in there. It's WCPC. Shout out to Western Cyber Protection Center. That was my old unit. Currently have my own business called Blackburn Security, focusing in federal contracting. I also make YouTube videos around OSINT and I guess whatever goes. It's kind of all over the place, but I do have a YouTube channel, so check it out. It's 0x03. And then I'm also a DC chapter organizer myself, DC253. So shout out to DC253. So what is OSINT? Well, OSINT stands for open source intelligence. It's basically information that's freely available. So whether that's public records, Google, websites, etc., basically it's information that anyone is able to find. It just takes a little bit of work to find it. This includes things like images, text, social media profiles, public records, videos, etc. Anything you can kind of Google or work your way into is OSINT. That includes data dumps. So if it was confidential data and someone threw it on a basebin or ghostbin or whatever, that's openly available, even though prior it wasn't. So it is open source, and that, I guess, means what isn't OSINT. So this is kind of my own personal opinion. That is interacting with the target, and that can mean a few things. So whether that's like going to the person you're investigating saying, hey, give me your credit card number, that's not OSINT. Or going to a website could be OSINT, could not be OSINT. My definition of OSINT is that the person or organization that you're targeting will have zero clue you're gathering intelligence on them. That's including going to their website, which I'll get into how to get around that later on. Anything that is a paid service, so if you have to pay to access certain tools, I don't believe that is OSINT, because you have to pay for that, even if they are gathering like openly available things. So like services like LexisNexis, I wouldn't consider OSINT. Special access forms, so any forms that require you to be vetted by individuals just to get access to. This is not websites you have to sign up for, like Shodan or Wiggle. And then anything that's not publicly available. I don't consider any of these things OSINT. Some other people might. I think it's up for discussion. So who's this talk for? Well, anyone with a curious mind. If you like to find stuff that you wouldn't normally find, here you go. Bug bounty hunters, if you like doing bug bounties, I found a lot of useful, situations where OSINT was definitely needed. It's kind of a big part of bug bounty, and that's doing recon. Red teams, so if you're on an engagement and you want to gather some very basic reconnaissance on a business. PIs, if you're a private investigator, and beginners. That's kind of broad, but if you're just brand new to intelligence gathering, or if you're brand new to cybersecurity, you might walk away with some new skills here, I hope. So topics we're going to be talking about: IP space enumeration, subdomain enumeration, Shodan. How are you going to have a talk on OSINT without Shodan? Google dorking, GitHub code searching, LinkedIn, and wireless. That last one's kind of a curveball if you're into OSINT. So let's start off with IP space enumeration. So we are going to find the IP addresses to an organization. This is very easy to do, and you'll be kind of shocked how easy it is. So what I like to do, and what's kind of like my go-to for anything IP related and enumeration, is finding the autonomous system numbers for a business. Now, let's say like I'm University of Washington. Well, I actually have an example right here. I am University of Washington. I am ASN 73, and I own these IP addresses, and that's publicly available online. The service I like to go to is Hurricane Electric, their BGP website, so bgp.he.net. And basically in the search bar, I put in quotes, University of Washington, and voila, I got their autonomous system numbers right there, all 4 of them, and then their IP ranges as well. So that was easy. I didn't have to do any Nmap. I didn't have to do any mask. I didn't have to do any of that. I just typed in University of Washington, got their autonomous system numbers, and I'm good to go. I got their IPs just like that. Now, I will say most organizations, if they're smaller, probably won't have autonomous system numbers, but it's worth checking. And then continuing on with that, you can go into Shodan, which we'll cover later on more in depth about Shodan. But Shodan has their own search, filter, ASN : and then you put in the autonomous system number in there, and you get results from that autonomous system. You see the IP addresses, maybe some host names, some services. We'll get into that later. Subdomain enumeration. So this one is kind of the same concept as IP space enumeration, but with, subdomains. So my go-to for a very easy, high-level subdomain enumeration is dnsdumpster.com. You throw in a domain name, and it spits out all of the DNS records. That includes A records, TXT records, MX. I'm not going to get into what any of that means, but you could get mail servers, their subdomains, their name resolvers, all that stuff. So you can see right here we have like uw.edu. We have some subdomains. So chd2.uw.edu. We have the IP address, and we have the full FQDN, fully qualified domain name right there. So giant list, and you can also export that to like a CSV. So my use case for this is if I'm going to move away from OSINT and actually doing an attack, I'll export all of these IP addresses and throw it into something like MassScan and scan all of those IPs and see what's open. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. So, and you can also see that it includes IP addresses in there as well. So if something didn't show up on Shodan or nothing showed up, doing the host command on Linux, well, you get some IP addresses right there. Another tool is crt.sh. This is included in Nahamsek's Lazy Recon repo, but this is basically pulling subdomains that are using the certificate of like the main domain. So like uw.edu will have like their TLS cert. We'll also include the subdomains as well if they share that same certificate. So you can see right here we have things in here like citrix.nursing.uw.edu. If you know what Citrix is, that's kind of an interesting target if you're doing bug bounties, if UW had a bug bounty program, but I digress. So it pulls, like I said, pulls DNS names from TLS certificates, and it's included in Nahamsek's Lazy Recon repo, which we will cover in a bit. Another way is to just do some very basic Google searching, which we'll cover Google dorking in a bit. But you use the site parameter or site filter. So we've done site : uw.edu, and then we did minus site uw.edu or minus site www.uw.edu because we want to filter out the results containing uw.edu. And you can see we got results right here: span port.uw.edu, ISO uw.edu, etc., etc. And we have 446,000 results. And you also get cache content, which we will cover in a bit. And I'm going to pause and go get some water. Apologies. Okay. I don't need headphones. Why do I need headphones? And then, like I mentioned earlier, Lazy Recon. This is on GitHub. This is a little bit more time intensive to run, but Lazy Recon basically aggregates a bunch of reconnaissance tools. I can't vet 100% this is entirely OSINT. I haven't checked everything to make sure that there's like no touching of endpoints of the corporation or anything like that. But basically it aggregates a bunch of tools together and it runs in the background. So you could just do /recon or lazyrecon.sh and then the domain name, and then you could just kind of close out that terminal or make it run on like a screen. And it runs in the background, and then it gathers all the info for you, and you can review it later. So that is Lazy Recon by Nahamsek, who is a bug bounty hunter, a pretty badass one. He streams as well, so definitely check out his Twitch streams when he goes live. And Nahamsek is his handle on Twitter. So Shodan, this is like my favorite website of all time. Let's get straight into it. So what is Shodan? It's shodan.io. That is the domain name. It's an internet scanner. And it scans all the time on your behalf. And when I say on your behalf, meaning it scans and indexes it. You don't have to do anything. You don't kick off any scans. Shodan's just scanning all the time. So it's an internet scanner. Basically, think of it as Nmap, but on the entire internet, excluding a few IP ranges. So it's an internet scanner. It's scanning for open ports, services, autonomous system numbers, etc. It's a giant Nmap scan. I don't know a better way to put it. It's just a giant Nmap scan. And it can also take screenshots, which we'll cover in a bit. But it can take screenshots of web pages and RDP and all that. So if you're doing recon on an organization and they have port 3389 open, Shodan will take those screenshots on your behalf, and you could see, oh, these are the users that logged in. Oh, they've disabled authentication, or whatever. And it's completely passive, meaning that the website or the corporation you're doing OSINT on, they see Shodan scanning them, but they don't see you scanning them. You can browse Shodan, click on like the images. You're not ever connecting with the website itself. and it's archived somewhat. It scans and it stores it, the scan until the next time it scans, that IP again, which I don't know how frequent Shodan does that. But it basically, it does its scan, and then it saves that scan for however long it saves it for. So it's a great way to view data that is a little bit older, but you don't have to manually do the scan yourself. So it's pretty nice. So on Shodan, there's all sorts of search filters you can use. It's kind of crazy, and I'm actually building a GitHub repo as I was in the middle of making these slide decks for Shodan and Google Dorking, all the different search filters you can use on Shodan and Google. Because there's a ton. I can't cover, it could be its own slide or its own talk of all the things you could do on Shodan. So we're just doing a very basic search right here. So we're doing org : and then in quotes, University of Washington. So now it's searching for everything associated with the organization named University of Washington. And you can see Shodan has 11,000 results. And I believe they pull the organization name from the Autonomous System Numbers organization. So my methodology to doing the search via org is to go on like BGPHE, which we've covered, type in University of Washington, and then throwing the autonomous system number into Shodan, and then it'll say you can see like under the IP address like University of Washington. Some organizations will be like Blackburn Security, but if you type in org : in quotes Blackburn Security, it might not show up because it might show up on Shodan as Blackburn Security LLC or company or something like that. So I'm just a little bit more thorough. So I look up the AES number, which I know is going to yield results most of the time on here, and then click on like the bolded like University of Washington or whatever organization. Click on that, and then delete the autonomous system number in the search. And now this will aggregate all of the autonomous system numbers associated with that organization and just make one, result like this. So if I looked up like all 4 of those AS numbers for University of Washington, I'd get like 900 and maybe 1,000, but it aggregates it all together. So finding juicy ports. Now this is kind of vague, but basically we're looking for ports that an attacker might go after. I just did some very high level ports in here. So I did org University of Washington space port and then : I did 21, so FTP 445, which is SMB or Samba, 3389, which is RDP, and then 5900, which is VNC. So you can see we have 64 results that belong to University of Washington and have those ports open. And you could go down and view them if you wanted or whatever, but notice how I used comma on the port. So like port 21, 445, 3389. That allows you to add multiple entries for one search filter. So helpful tip if you've been using Shodan for a while and you've been typing out port 22 space port 21 or whatever. Just use commas. So this is what people mainly use Shodan for. It's cameras and stuff and security cams. I can make a whole video on how to find all sorts of stuff with webcams and industrial control systems and all that, but that's for another time. So if I want to find screenshots on Shodan, most of the time it's going to be cameras and VNC and RDP. I did, org University of Washington and then space has underscore screenshot : true, meaning that it's looking for IPs that belong to University of Washington, and Shodan took a screenshot of it. So you can see these two results right here are of the tennis court at University of Washington. You'll get different results for all sorts. You might get RDP, VNC, cams like this. It's kind of can be all over the place. So, but that's how you find, webcams and all that fun stuff. Now, this one is a little bit more advanced, and I don't expect any beginner to, know how to do this, but you could search via favicon. Now, favicon is like if you open up a tab and you go to like in this case, University of Washington, you'll get that like little icon on the top left or of the tab or whatever. That's the favicon. And you could search Shodan for that favicon. It's a little bit more advanced. I have a video on my YouTube channel about calculating that because it's a base 64 hash, numeric hash. It's way in the weeds for this video, but that is a way to do recon for a specific organization. So if they might have some IPs that creeped outside their autonomous system number range, but they have that little favicon, you could search via the favicon base 64 numeric hash on Shodan. So I have a video for that. I can explain that individually in like its own video, but that's definitely outside the scope of beginner sort of stuff. So now we're going to be doing some Google dorking or Google hacking. And I forgot to add it into my slide decks, but there is a website called the Google Hacking Database, which is just a giant repository of all these different Google searches you can use to find like passwords, SQL backups. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I think it's just or Google GHDB.com. Google Hacking Database. Just, I guess, Google that. It has all sorts of searches on there. So what is Google dorking? It's just advanced Googling. Like you do your normal Googling, and then there's like very specific filters you can use on Google to like kind of narrow your results down. So think of it as like a shotgun blast, bring it down to like a sniper's shot sort of thing. And I'll include a complete list of search operators in the show notes, aka my GitHub. So check that out. It'll be on my Twitter account. So basic Google search. So this is what you probably use, like Google or Yandex or Baidu or whatever search engine. You'll just type in like University of Washington or whatever. And you can see we get results from Wikipedia, Tacoma.uw.edu, uwb.edu, Twitter. It's all over the place. And I'm sure there's millions of results in here. And that's going to be a lot of data you're going to have to parse through. So let's bring that shotgun blast down all the way down to a sniper's shot. So let's bring those results from, we don't want Wikipedia, we don't want Twitter, we only want uw.edu. So we use the search operator site:uw.edu. So now we have 455,000 results that only yield things from uw.edu. So everything in those 455,000 pages is going to be from uw.edu. So let's find some files in uw.edu, and we're going to use the ext filter. So you can see that right there, ext, and that's synonymous with file type. So you might have seen that. So file type : or ext : they both do the same thing. So ext : and then I actually put it in the parentheses. This is kind of like not an advanced, but it's kind of somewhat an advanced technique. So I'm searching for PDFs, CSVs, Excel spreadsheets, and TXT files in uw.edu, and I put that in parentheses and space those out with pipes, as you call them. So now we're getting results. So 8,480 results for PDFs or CSVs or Excel spreadsheets or TXTs in uw.edu. So now let's find specific texts in uw.edu. So you use a search filter in text, and then I put it in quotes. So cybersecurity, and I'm looking for PDFs. So you can see we got some results right here. These are all PDFs that have cybersecurity in that file that belong to uw.edu. So you can see where I'm going with this. There's so much stuff you can use with Google dorking, so much info you can find. So I'll let you all kind of go down your own rabbit holes doing all this. Now, cached content. I talked about earlier about connecting with the endpoint, meaning that you are going to the website directly. Google caches content for you, and you can actually view like PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and all that a lot faster because you're not downloading it from the website or anything like that. You're downloading it basically from Google's cache, which is probably going to be more local to you versus like wherever the website is you're doing recon on. It also allows you to view content that has been deleted. So sometimes like a Twitter post, like let's say someone said something on Twitter and they deleted it. Well, if Google cached it it doesn't matter if that, content was deleted on Twitter. It could probably still show up on Twitter or Google's cache. You can view things like PDFs, HTML, spreadsheets, all that good jazz through Google's cache. But the most important thing about the cache with OSINT is you're not directly connecting with the website. And the way you get the cache is if you see like the URL right here, and then you see this like little drop down, click on the little, down arrow and it says cached, click on that and you'll be able to load it that way. So now let's do some GitHub code searching. So GitHub is like a giant repo for code. If you make a, program or whatever, you can upload to GitHub. You can host websites on there. GitHub is a developer's kind of go-to. You have other sites like GitLab and all that, but GitHub's, I would say, is probably the most used one. So doing a code search will allow you to search for employees or students. You could possibly view confidential data. People really suck at security, and they might throw some things in there that they might have forgotten about. They might have forgot that you left that comment in the code that, has their password or whatever in it. And you can also build a rapport. So if you're going to be doing a social engineering engagement, you can, narrow your, attack down to a specific person, and you kind of have like this knowledge about them, and you could talk to them about something. So if they're building like all this code for, XYZ project, and you see them in person, you could definitely talk about that, and they'll be very interested in talking to you. So basic GitHub code search, you go in the top left, and I typed in, University of Washington in quotes, and I got results, 1,395 results with University of Washington in it. So these are going to be repositories. You can see that on the top left right there, and they all have University of Washington. And the reason why I put it in quotes, it's going to read it as a literal string, not just like university and of and Washington. It's searching for that specific phrase verbatim. And then continuing on, the GitHub search, University of Washington, all I did was clicked on users right there. And now we have users of GitHub that have University of Washington in their, bio or whatever you call it on GitHub. So PhD student, student, research scientist, blah, 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 blah. Work your way down. So now you can search code. We're going to be doing code searching by organization. Unfortunately, UW didn't have a organization registered with GitHub, so I'm just using AWS. So I'm searching org:AWS, and then in quotes, password. And now I clicked on the code tab right there, and now I got 4,500 results of password being under the organization of AWS on GitHub, and it highlights the results right here. So I'll let your mind go with that as far as bug bounties go. There's actually tools out there like TruffleHog, which I don't think is working anymore because of Python 3, but searches for like plain text creds and stuff like that. Searching for files on GitHub, so we use the same thing, org, AWS, and then language. Instead of like file type or extension, we're using language : and then we put in CSV. And now we're getting all of the CSV files that belong under the organization AWS on GitHub. So now this is the fun stuff. Ish. So LinkedIn is basically a hacker's pipe dream of rapport building. This is where you find employees of organizations. You can find people in HR, security, you name it. If they have a LinkedIn, they're probably going to be a little braggadocious about what they do, and pretty open. And if you're trying to build a rapport on a business, it's a great way to find some stuff. It's a professional Facebook social media site, so everyone there is business suit, super, formal and all that. It's a great way to enumerate the tech stack, projects that have been done there, management chain, and I'm not including examples of this, but some of the big tech companies, people like to share their badges as a celebration of tenure at a particular organization. I don't know why that's a thing, but if you're going to be doing a social engineering engagement, well, you know how the badges look because they like to take a little picture of it and post it on LinkedIn. So searching for employees. So on LinkedIn, you'll need an account for this. And I'll also note, if you're going to be going onto any of these pages, it will probably help to have gold on LinkedIn, which is a paid service, unfortunately, because it'll notify them that you viewed their account. So you could probably just make a sock puppet, or a sock puppet's a fake account, and you could view their accounts and get more intel that way. But we basically typed in cybersecurity on LinkedIn, hit enter, and then under current companies, I typed in University of Washington and selected that. So now we're getting results for people that work at University of Washington that have some relation to cybersecurity. So you can see right here. So LinkedIn, it's kind of niche, but that's kind of the way I do it. And I left out going onto the profiles because that will notify whoever you're doing intel on that you viewed them. But if you do have LinkedIn Gold, you can go ahead and do that. Just make sure you select do not notify. And then the last one here is finding corporate SSIDs. Now this one's pretty interesting and kind of fun. So let's get into it a little bit more. So what is SSID? I totally forgot what it stands for. I've said it my entire life and don't know what it stands for, but it's the Wi-Fi names. It's your Wi-Fi name. So it's your Wi-Fi's and internet. So if you have a wireless router at your home, you probably have an SSID. Allows you to scope out open and free networks. So if you're doing recon on a particular area, you can click on freenet. We'll get into that in a little bit, and view unprotected networks, and that might be a pivot point for you to get onto the network, pull some stuff down. That's not OSINT doing that attack, but gathering that recon is. And you can also be used for non-OSINT intelligence gathering. I actually made a video, and I've since deleted it, about going on to Shodan, finding a printer that was open to the internet, going onto that printer, turning on the wireless card to enumerate all of the SSIDs around that printer, and I'll show you what I've done from there. It's geolocating an IP address with the printer. That's what the name was. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So the go-to site to gather intel on wireless networks is wiggle.net, W-I-G-L-E.net, and it maps Wi-Fi. So this data is collected from people war driving. So war driving is I do this. It's such a niche hobby for people to do. They basically, you have, something like this is actually my Raspberry Pi war driving rig. And I basically have an antenna that I plug on here and a GPS module, and I go and scan for Wi-Fi networks and upload it to Wiggle. So it's collected from people war driving, and it has archived networks that go all the way back to 2001. So we'll get into specifics of Wiggle in a bit. So this is kind of what Wiggle looks like. So I typed in University of Washington on Wiggle, and each of these little dots symbolizes a network. Now I do have the search going all the way back to 2001, so you could drag this little thing right here and bring it to a more newer date, I guess. But each of these little purple dots signifies a Wi-Fi or an SSID or a Wi-Fi network. And then zooming in on the map itself will actually show the wireless names themselves. So you can see we have NWG real estate 5 gigahertz and whatever file scan Wi-Fi AP, University of Washington, blah 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 blah. And I'll put the dot in kind of the location where the war driver or whatever person found it. We'll kind of put it on the map, kind of exactly where it's at. Almost. Not to the exact location, but plus or minus 50 meters, I would say. So zooming in, this is the University of Washington campus right here. Now the Wiggle Advanced Search is a pretty powerful tool. So I did that very basic reconnaissance. I found, all of the SSIDs, and I want to find all the SSIDs that are of interest to me, because you could see, if I go back, we could see okay, well, Motorola 828 whatever right there, that's not of interest to me. That's not of interest to me. NWG real estate's not of interest to me, but University of Washington is an interest of mine, or University of Washington, whatever that says, is of interest to me. So let's find all of the SSIDs in the world with that particular name. So I go to, basically you go to, I think it's View. I click on View and it'll bring down a menu, click on Advanced Search. And then under SSID network name exact match, I just put in University of Washington. and then last observed. So if you want to find the freshest results, I just put in, 2020, January 1st, right there, in that format right there. And you click query, and you get results like this. So you get the SSID on a map. So if you click on map, it'll drop a little pin on that location. The MAC address of that router, the SSID name, first seen, last seen, the kind of cryptography that the wireless standard it's using. So you can see right there. I don't know if that means WEP or what. I think that's WEP or open. But that's like an old network. Like that's an old router right there that they have. So first seen in 2001. Nice. And then the channel it's running on. So we have 685 results of SSIDs named University of Washington that has been found since, or most recently seen as late of, or January 1st, 2020. So it can be found no earlier than January 1st, 2020. So it's going to be the freshest results. So that is it. Any questions that you have? I know that was a ton. Hopefully you'll be able to view this in a DVR format and stop and kind of rewatch it. But any questions any of you have, feel free to send me a message on Twitter or, at me on Twitter. It's just 0x4k0. I have a Discord server as well. I have, I think, like 60-ish people on my Discord server that are all subscribed to me on YouTube, which, smash that subscribe button on my YouTube channel. And all of this will be linked in my bio. So anyways, thank you for hosting me. I hope you all enjoyed my talk. Yeah, that's it. So y'all take care. Goodbye.
Hey folks, my name is Adib. Glad to spend some time with you guys today and talk about malware analysis 101. Just a quick shout out to Prabhakar for throwing my name earlier to the DEF CON team during their hunt for speakers, and appreciate the DEF CON Delhi team for accommodating this talk. So some of you can recognize that this is the Vault 101 from Fallout. Again, there's a particular parable to this. When I was introduced to malware analysis years ago, it was this doorway to a whole new world, and that's why I had to pick the slide with the Vault 101. Well, about me, I'm a senior security engineer with First American. First American, if you guys haven't heard about them, they are in the financial services market for over a century now. And I'm with their security incident response team. I started off early as a pen tester, obviously with very less knowledge of sys internals, of course, but then jumped into SOC and finally here. So what are we doing? We are going to analyze some malicious software, and with a view to understand its functionality. By the end of this talk, you will be equipped and should be able to analyze the functionality and understand its behavior or the potential impact a sample might have. The only difference, in my opinion, between a software and a malware is the intent. So understanding intent and telling that narrative is very critical. So there are some key takeaways with the malwares for the beginners. There are some samples that might not execute in your guest virtual machine because it might check for sensor data. If you are analyzing a mobile malware, let's say an Android malware, it might look for the sensors, the gyro sensors, and if there is no data being thrown or there is no change in the sensor data, then it might not execute. It might also check if, let's say, Adobe Reader was installed in the last 30 days, then it probably can decide not to execute anymore. So why do we need malware analysis? Obviously to understand the attacker's intent. But also my take on this would be to share with the community a story. If you've read any analysis reports or blogs about a specific malware family, it sounds thrilling, right? The narrative matters in this industry. There's a difference between just throwing out the samples and dumping the IOCs and hashes versus laying down the facts with a narrative like this. Well, obviously our intent is not to write an epic like Star Wars, but I hope you guys get the picture there. Okay, now just a filler slide, just contrasting some difference between static and dynamic analysis. So the static analysis, you will need a lot of understanding about the architecture, if it's a 32-bit or a 64-bit. And it's going to help you a lot in automating because you will know the internals of the Windows or the sample that's going to execute in that particular environment. Also, you could sometimes do further analysis on some of the samples that might be packed and will not execute in the sandbox, which are sandbox aware. On the other hand, the dynamic analysis, you will be detonating the payload in a sandbox environment. Now, because of this, you might have more visibility into the upcoming payloads, probably the next few stages of the sample. Just doing dynamic analysis might not help you in the long run because you might not be able to automate or look into the packed samples. So how are we going to do this? Well, there are a lot of ways to analyze a sample these days. The most easiest is the automated analysis. There are a lot of solutions out there who provide that. The only catch which a lot of organizations doesn't desire is the data becomes public. So, and also some sites like AnyRun allows the samples to be downloaded. So when the data becomes public, that's a problem for a lot of the organizations. And these automated sandboxes will give you no control over the execution. There might be chances that the sample sleeps for a good 60 seconds, and so you will not see anything in your automated analysis. I have a quick demo for you guys and some examples in automated analysis just after this. But this talk's going to be more around how we can do dynamic and static analysis in-house in our lab, right? So in our lab, we'll be able to detonate it safely and capture and control that information privately. The only problem is that sometimes it's time consuming to set up the lab initially, but once it's done, it's going to be a breeze after that. And it is static. Of course, there's not going to be in any execution, but still it's safe to perform it under a lab environment. You could also create your other kinds of rules or policies from that static analysis. And coming to the code analysis or reversing or even memory analysis part, let's have that conversation for a different talk, probably the 102. It's going to need more knowledge and hands-on. So if you were a Super Saiyan, you would need a power level of 9,000 or more. So just look into how any run works. It's one of my favorites because it's automated and it gives us an interactive VM for just 5 minutes. So after the 5th minute, the VM just shuts down. And you need to do whatever analysis before that time. So it has this nice little tab which explains the outgoing traffics, and it also does a correlation under the threads tab based on its own signatures within the any run. At the right side is the process tab where you can browse the process ancestry. It's more simple, and that's what I love about the any run. You could also download the sample by just clicking on get sample. We will have a look into the process graph, which is the button over here, and it's going to give you a neat little graph like this, where you will also be able to go into or pivot into that particular file which you're interested in. So skipping a bit, this is the process tab we just mentioned, and there's also the attacks framework, and any run will map your sample to the different techniques in the framework automatically. You could pivot more into that, and let's say if this is the only process in the workflow that you're interested in, you could just click on it and pivot into that. You could look at the registry changes, the files that it touched on, any other HTTP requests that it made. So we are looking at a QBot sample, and this is a zip file we received, and inside this zip file was a malicious Visual Basic script. Inside the Visual Basic script is the code that will try to download the 8.png, and the PNG file is the final payload, which we believe has the code that will create a beacon. So the PNG file is not actually an image file. As you can see here, it has the magic number MZ, which means it's a Windows executable. As you can see above from the thread, the ID, it's more of an executable than an actual image. So you could do most of the things with the automated analysis, but there are some limitations. For this particular sample, we could never get the PNG to execute because it is sandbox aware, and that is why it creates a sleep for a long time, and the any run just becomes useless in this case. I think I can show that here. You can see here that for every delayed simulation, it uses ping.exe for that, and inside the PNG file, it was packed, so the execution just stops there in the any run. And apart from that, still it's one of my favorites, and I recommend you guys just check it out. Going to the Joe sandbox, it's just an automated sandbox. It's not interactive, so you will not be able to interact with the sandbox during the execution. After the execution, you get a beautiful report like this. The reason I love Joe sandbox is because it's very technical, and the reporting is just fantastic. And here I just uploaded an emoted sample, and as you can see, it plots a beautiful graph saying that the sample looks more like a banker and a Trojan, and probably like an evader. So emotet is a banking Trojan. It is known for evading the antivirus softwares or any other IDS or IPS that you might have on your endpoints. Apart from that, Joe Sandbox, like I mentioned, is more technical, and they are more transparent in the reporting. So they will explain how they found this sample to be malicious. In this case, they have highlighted the YARA rule that the community has provided to find this sample. You could also download those YARA rules and use it for your automation. And it also does the same job of mapping the sample to different techniques in the MITRE's attack framework. But the most useful thing I see, apart from this behavior graph, is that is the ancestry graph, which we'll jump right into. So basically, a code is going to execute a lot of things, and it might not execute some stuffs based on a decision that it took earlier in the tree. And we will be seeing all those in this beautiful report here. And basically, it records every step the sample has taken, and every decision path it has taken, and the paths that it has not taken, which will help me understand the remaining part of the code. There we go. I'm sorry, that was my bad fumble fingers. So anyway, while this is all interesting and probably confusing to a lot of people, the goal is to just show or highlight the capabilities of the online sandbox. But I promise that the 101 lab will be very simple and useful for the beginners. I just want you guys to detonate samples, as much samples as you can inside the box, and just have fun. But in the long run, you might want to consider changing that into useful analysis reports that can be later used for threat intelligence, or you could become an expert reverse engineer. You could also go down the path of research and look into more complex samples in the future. So there are multiple areas we can monitor and collect information. But in this 101 lab, you will be equipped to look into or record the network level changes, process level, or file system level changes. The memory changes is something that we don't have visibility. In this setup, like I mentioned earlier, it's not complex. It's just a conversation for a different time. Moving on, so an ideal scenario will be that you might get a request from your SOC saying that, hey, the script is malicious. Could you guys just analyze it for us? And you could take in that script or an executable, a DLL file, anything into your analysis lab and perform either static, hybrid, or dynamic analysis. Now, we already discussed what a static and dynamic is. So in a hybrid analysis, is the term I use when I run the executable in the environment without an actual internet connection. So for that, we use something like a fake net, where it will proxy the DNS request internally and give an OK. So don't worry about that. We have a demo for that as well. And once you perform your analysis, you will be having a lot of information in your hand. You will be having the indicators of compromises, the IPs, hashes, and all that. you will finally put that into a virtual report for your management. So this lab setup is going to help you do all of those, right? So to start the setup, the first thing you need is any virtualization platform, and I personally prefer the Oracle VirtualBox because it has basically all the features that I'm looking for to perform malware analysis. Other alternatives could be VM Player or Zen Desktop. So basically, you want to have multiple snapshots. Snapshots are nothing but a state of a virtual machine. So when you run that snapshot, it will just start from that state. It doesn't need to boot the whole OS and all that. And you could also clone the VMs, so you can have backups and personalize those. It's also good to install bloatwares like Adobe Flash or Adobe Reader, and obviously Microsoft Suite, so that you can analyze the sample. And in the past, we have seen that the payloads doesn't execute without a certain software installed. And just a small demo on VirtualBox here. So as you can see at the left, I have created 3 types of machines. It's basically a clone of each other. And let me go to the lesson pointer. Yeah. So I use the clone option to create all these. Basically, I built just one Windows 10 VM. You can download Windows 10 student version ISO from the web, and use that to create a virtual machine. Once you have done, as you can see here, I've created multiple states, and you could start your execution from this state and go along, and the current state will be changed to the state where you left at the last. And from that point, you can create a snapshot, and it will be saved something like start 1. You could name it anything. So let me just show you guys. So as you can see, the parent start, I've just named it so that my analysts can understand what softwares are installed on it. Just a small description. And then we are going to just run the VM here at the end. And as soon as we run, you can see that the current state has changed. And once it's changed, once you're inside the VM, you could do any changes, and then it's gonna let you save or restore to a previous snapshot. So the idea behind using VM is that you want to have everything ready, the softwares and the environment ready. You just need to go in, put in the sample, execute it, and come out of it. If you want, you just need to revert back to the start state, right? And as you can see, I've just clicked on restore, and this is gonna restore me back to the start 1, which is highlighted here. So once you are inside the virtual machine of your Windows 7 or Windows 10, preferably, you will need some kind of a PE analyzer. So PE is nothing but a portable executable file. Executables, DLLs, even docx or Excels have portable executables within them, which you can analyze. So like I mentioned, we will just stick with PE for this talk. So these PE analyzers will help you analyze the PE headers, which will have a lot of metadata, information necessary for the Windows OS to load some modules. Looking at those imports and exports, you will get a lot of information. You could also perform string analysis. Without the dynamic analysis, just looking at the strings of a file, if it's not packed, then you might understand the capabilities of a file. Uh, there is one side effect for performing static analysis using PE analyzers. If a file is packed, that means most of the data inside is kind of encrypted, and it's decrypted during the execution. So if that's the case, these PE analyzers will give you a hint that the file is probably packed. So my recommendation is PE Studio, but there is also PE View, PE Beer. That's also one of my favorites. Let's have a quick demo on the PE Viewer. So in this case, you have a Notepad exe, a Notepad setup file that has been sent to you for analysis, which the IT believes is not a legit Notepad setup file. So you're going to quickly open PE Studio and load the sample inside. So right off, you see that. So as you can see here, the first byte is MZ, which is highlighted by the PE Studio. MZ is for any portable executable format, and it's also going to calculate the hashes, which you can check in the other OSINT places like VT, VirusTotal. It's also going to give you the compiler stamp here, which explains that the executable has been compiled a long time back. It also shows you a hint of what kind of a compiler it runs on or was used to create the sample. And going to the libraries, so you will be able to correlate a library and an import. So let's see. So basically every executable needs a lot of libraries which are inbuilt in the OS, and it depends on them for some basic actions like printing or reading data. Each library is going to have multiple functions, which is nothing but the imports, and TPE Studio will help you look at all these import functions and if a function is being exported and all that. It's also going to give you a blacklist if it thinks that it's potentially could be used in a malware. And going ahead, as you can see, it gives a rating of 1 if it thinks that that's a very malicious function to call, and that's why it has flagged it with the priority 1. So this reg set value is basically going to create or set a registry. You should understand that the more you do static analysis, Windows is very noisy, and most executables will create or make changes to registries, the legit ones. So you will need to differentiate or baseline that to understand the malicious behaviors. And going ahead, as you can see here, the reg set value is nothing but, or in this case, the terminate process function is a child of the kernel32.dll library, which you can see if the library is delay loaded or if it's implicitly loaded. So a delay loaded function is loaded at a later part, which is not explained here. But an implicit load means that without that, the code will not start running. So apart from this kernel32, every other library here is going to load at a later point of time when the code requires it. So as you can see, just by analyzing the PE headers, there's just a lot of information to take in. skipping forward. So that this debug path is a very good place to look for because script kiddies forget to change the debug paths or mask it, and any Windows any executable that's created with something like a Visual Studio Code or older versions of Visual Studio creates a PDB, which is the debugging path. That path will have sometimes the username here explicitly open, which will help you in at a later time attributing to a particular threat actor. So I think that should do. Let's go forward to the Wireshark. So once you have installed PE Studio or a similar PE analyzer, I recommend installing Wireshark or any network packet analyzer, preferably something that can save the packets in a .pcap format. Now that is mandatory, so it will help us in the reporting part. Next up is FakeNet. So FakeNet is a very old tool which is still being used, at least by me. So basically it sets your DNS queries to local 127.0.0.1 and it will respond back to any DNS queries with a OK. So it's going to listen for all DNS outbound queries and it will respond with an OK. So that way a malware without an internet can sometimes go ahead in its execution path. A lot of times the malware samples just come and at the first stage they make a ping to something like msn.com and they wait for a response before they go ahead with the execution. So FakeNet can help us do that. And just to mention, there is a small bug in the FakeNet. We'll talk about that in some time now. Okay, so another quick demo here. We have opened FakeNet, and once it's opened, as you guys can see, it's listening on multiple different ports. It's gonna try to respond to any of those outbound connections with an OK or keep alive signals. So the bug I was talking about is that even after you're closed FakeNet, sometimes you might not get your internet connection back. There could be issues with your network, and for that you just need to go to your IPv4 settings and change the preferred DNS to obtain automatically, and that should fix the FakeNet bug, and you should be able to reach out to the internet. Going to the next slide, we're going to install something called RedShot. So RedShot is going to keep us, it's going to help us keep track of the registry changes. So the way it works is pretty simple. So first you take a shot before the execution, and then you take the second shot after the execution. So it's going to compare both the first and the second shots, and then it's going to give you the difference, which is nothing but the changes happened over the time. So that sounds similar, right? And then we are going to install a tool called Procmon. So Procmon is a very popular tool among the old network defender guys. So Procmon gives unparalleled view into the file systems. It's going to record the registry changes, the process spawns, process drops. Some kinds of injections can be detected with Procmon. if a new thread has been created. So all this can be recorded using procmon. This procmon is also going to help us correlate the network connection that a particular process has made. Okay. The only side effect of running procmon for a long time is that it's very bulky, and for every second it's gonna become bulkier. So make sure to start recording just before execution so that the graph doesn't get very complex for you. And the final software that we will need is ProcDart. Of course, it needs some tweaks during the time of installation, but it's going to help you visualize everything that you have done so far and give you a neat story. So the ProcDart works basically by combining the results you got from procmon, which we saw before, and the Wireshark PCAP file. So it's going to combine that and give you a nice visual representation. So before I can show you guys the demo of the lab, just a best practice. So I would recommend that you guys run it in this order so you can capture the maximum amount of information and limit the additional resources. So basically it says that you can let's consider this with the internet, because that's what we are going to demonstrate now. With the internet, you can first do the PE analysis. After that's done, once you think that this is all the information you can get from static analysis, just run a red shot, first one, the first registry shot, and then you can start the Wireshark and start recording, and then you can start the procmon and start capturing there, and then you can execute your malicious program. As soon as you're happy with that, once you're given enough time, stop the procmon and then the Wireshark, and then capture the next registry shot too, and you will record the registry shots separately, and you will use the ProcDart to combine the procmon and the Wireshark results. And finally, once you are happy with your analysis, just revert your state X back to the start, because that's the best feature of the virtual machines. And you will finally have your story. Okay, so a quick demo. So I know I haven't covered a minute. The tool, it's basically an open source antivirus. The reason behind it is because it's just an extra work for you to set up your lab, and for the newcomers, if you guys think that you don't want something go out of your hands or something escaping your sandbox, if you guys are worried about that kind of stuff, then having something like a minute is recommended, so you guys can have some control over the execution. So the way to do this is by not setting the block mode to automatic, but you can change that to ask here. You can change that to ask me, and it will ask you before executing or quarantining a file. You can whitelist that specific file that you want to run in the sandbox. But for the rest of the folks, I really don't recommend having any kind of AV for this beginner sandbox. Going forward, let's go back a step and recollect. So first, this is going to be the workflow, and let's start by opening the Wireshark, and then I'm going to open the registry shot. and take the first grid shot. So the thing about grid shot is that Windows in general is very noisy, so it's going to capture a lot of registry changes. There are always registry changes in the backend, so you need to kind of baseline what's the normal in Windows. And let's move that aside. So once the first shot is complete, it's going to unlock the second shot button. So once it's unlocked, you can move the red shot aside and open the Procmon. So in the Procmon, as soon as Procmon starts recording, I have stopped capturing by clicking on this button. Wireshark is also in a stop state. It's not capturing any network traffic. Now we start capturing. As soon as that, we will start the Procmon capturing, and then we are going to execute the sample as an administrator and let it run for a while. The control over execution time is a luxury we don't have in automated sandboxes, so we should make use of that in here. And once you think, okay, it's run for enough seconds, if it's a ransomware, you can let it run for a few more minutes. So in this case, I'm stopping the capture of the Wireshark and Procmon, and I am to the shot. So once the shot is complete, it's going to open up the difference in keys, the keys that has been deleted and added. Like I mentioned, since Windows is very noisy, there's really a lot of things here, and finding the malicious keys is finding any changes made by the malicious sample is going to be. Now we're going to save the pcap from Wireshark in a .pcap format. By default, Wireshark saves in pcap.ng. Make sure to change that. And then we're also going to save the firemon in a specific format in a .csv. And we're going to make sure to select all events while saving. The Procmon, when running for a few seconds, is going to give you a bulky log, so be aware of that. Now we have both the CSV file from Procmon and the .pcap file from Wireshark. We're going to use Procta to combine them into a beautiful graph that can give us a better story into our sample. So we're going to input both the files here and in the Windom input. So we have input both the files, and we're going to click on the three dots here near the launcher. So it's going to start analyzing the Procmon file, and it's going to give us the process that we might be interested in to analyze. And in the meanwhile, while it loads, let's look at the specific configuration that the Procmon needs to have, so the proc.dot can build a graph. If this configuration is not present, then the proc.dot will fail in the next stage where it's going to build the graph. You need to make sure to have the process name, the path, the process ID, and the thread ID enabled. Without this, the proc.dot cannot correlate or build the paths in the graph. Now, once the first stage of analysis is done, it's going to give us some interesting process IDs to pivot into. Now, we see that there are two notepad processes, but we only executed it once. So we're going to analyze that. Every kernel is going to assign the process ID in an ascending order. by default. So this should be the parent process. So first let's look at this. So I'm going to double click the 1156 process ID, and once I do that, I need to click on refresh so it can start building the graph. And if you haven't made the proper proc1 configuration, it's going to give you an error at this point in time. We need to give it some time for the proc dot to build the graph. It's going to build the graph with the process ID that we have chosen as the base and branch out from there. So once it loads, it's giving us a very complex graph. The reason I chose this sample is because it's very complex, and I want to highlight how proc dot can be used to easily deconstruct a very complex graph like this. So because of the complexity, we need to run this graph by every frame from the start to understand the program flow. Now, just to show you guys the features of the the proc dot, I'm gonna click on the movie button right here to understand better. So now the movie button is clicked. So what it's basically going to do is go to the first frame of the timeline, and it's going to wait there. You have multiple options. You can play it like a movie and have 10 frames per second of changes. So sometimes 10 FPS could be high. So you could increase that to something like 50 FPS or more. Even then, a complex graph like this is going to be very hard to understand. So the only way to analyze this sample is to go frame by frame and understand the changes. As you can see, I'm increasing the FPS and I'm starting to notice the change with respect to my process. And slowly it's going to play into the whole graph. But let's start analyzing the second process ID, because I see that the second process ID here has terminated unexpectedly. Now that's a very interesting thing for me to analyze. So I'm going to go back into the launcher and select the second process that we saw at the top of the list as the base of the graph. So I've clicked on the launcher and it's going to analyze the proc1 file again. Then it's going to give us again a list of process to choose from, and here I'm going to make the first one as the base. And once I've clicked that, it's gonna load the graph again, skipping that part. Yeah, so now we have the second graph. There's nothing much different from it. So let's start analyzing from the first frame to see if it's giving us a clear picture. So as you can see, I clicked on the movie button here and coming to the first frame, and I'm slowly looking at it from frame, and this is the first thread ID, which our process is tied to, and the same thread ID is speaking with a different process, basically a log file called sfc.exe.log. Let me show you guys that. So as you guys can see, this is our file, the Notepad++ sample, which is handled by this thread, and that thread is communicating with the sfc.exe.log. So sfc.exe is a legit Windows process, which is called when an executable is probably broken. So SFC basically stands for System File Checker. It will help put the file back sometimes and continue with the execution. But you don't need to worry, it's a Windows process. I see there is some communication going on between our file and this sfc.log file. But in some time, we are going to observe the sfc.exe program make an outbound connection, and that's a very interesting point we need to observe and record. So at this point of time, we see sfc.exe making an outbound connection to an external IP, which is very weird. And once that happens, we also see a response from that IP. So once that happens, we see simultaneously there is more communication between our process and the log file. By this point of time, I think we are seeing a process injection attempt from our notepad to either the sfc.exe, or the sfc.exe is just a temporary placeholder for our file until it can jump to a different file. The reason I can conclude that is because by now it's creating a different file, a .msi file, and also it's going to kill its own process here. As you can see, in a few frames later, it's killing the parent process that we started the investigation from. So beyond this point, the malicious process is injected code into probably a Windows legitimate application, and it can morph from there. So the analysis is very complex beyond that point, but you guys get the picture of how we can leverage Procdot to analyze a complex problem like this, easily deconstruct the pattern of the code. With this, we are at the end of the demo and our talk. But I hope you guys can take away a lot of the tools and implement it into your lab and start detonating some malware samples there. The one important thing that I forgot to mention is always record your analysis, take screenshots, make notes of whatever you're observing, so you can put them later in a proper report. You could get your hands on real world or active malware samples from various places, but not from VirusTotal. You won't be able to download samples from VirusTotal unless you have a vetted account or an enterprise account. You could download samples, active samples from AnyRun, Malshare, Contagio, Malware Dumps, or Cape Sandbox, and there are a lot. So getting a sample need not be your worry. And just the last few slides, the deck is really very old, patched up for the DEF CON crowd. There are a lot of new tools and solutions that can replace the list mentioned in this talk, but this setup still works. If you have queries on setting up the lab or face any technical issues, I'm active on Twitter and my DMs are open. My goal was basically to break the surface ice with malware analysis and give you guys a tool that can that you guys can leverage. But if you are really interested, please start analyzing more and more samples. With little bit of curiosity, you'll be an expert in no time. And if you find a better way or a more simpler way to do malware analysis, please share it with the InfoSec community. And thank you guys.
Hi everyone, so my name's Heffernan and I'm going to be talking about exploiting the human vulnerability. First, I'd like to thank the guys at DEF CON Delhi for inviting me on to talk, and I'm looking forward to the other talks. It's such an amazing lineup of speakers. So before I get started, I'm going to talk about who I am, where I come from and what I do. So my name is Emma Heffernan. I come from Ireland. I'm currently studying cybersecurity and digital forensics at TU Dublin. I'm also a part-time security analyst at EdgeScan, and throughout my talk, I have a little spearfishing experience I had when I started at the company. Then I'm also an occasional CTF player. I love problem solving, and since quarantine, I also found a love for Vim and Linux and all things cyber and learning new things. Like it's just a passion. My passion is cybersecurity. So when I was in school, I always wanted to be a maths teacher. I always looked up to my maths teacher and thought, one day I wanted to be like her. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. I took my second option for college, which was cybersecurity and digital forensics. And so far, I don't regret it. I love the course and I love the industry. People are so nice. And, when I joined Twitter, which I recommend everyone do because you will learn from people and you'll engage and it's a great way. And I wouldn't offend the guys if I wasn't on Twitter. And, it's really important to try and engage and network with other people to find these new connections, which I would highly recommend anyone to do. So before I get started with my talk, the question I have, or most people have, or most people know is, what is social engineering? So there's many examples, and sometimes social engineering is used for a malicious reason, or sometimes it could be for a genuine reason to make sure the barriers are up so that, a breach or some sort of hack isn't done on the company as such. So to give a brief definition of social engineering, it's the art of exploiting the human. Rather than exploiting the technology and hacking the technology, we're hacking the human. And social engineering has proven to be very successful in many ways for a hacker to get inside organizations, companies, etc. So in my next slide, I have social engineering attacks that are used today. So fake it until we make it. Most people think of this as, like what sort of example can you give? So my example would be acting flustered. You're walking into a building, someone's coming up behind you, you feel guilty not holding the door if they've so much stuff in their hands and they're flustering and everything's going everywhere. And, you're going to hold it out of politeness or, and that person's just going to walk straight in. So it's dangerous because sometimes people, let's say nowadays, and an effective way to stop any of this sort of attack happening would be, oh, can I see your ID badge? Or, maybe you just have to close that door. Even if the person's flustered, you just have to be cautious of who, if you've never seen this person before, you have to be cautious. So, another example would be, if you're a developer or you may not be a developer, but you pretend to be a developer and you can ring up a company security or tech support and you're like, oh, I'm locked out, can't get back in, don't know what my password is, it's saying it's incorrect, and they're like, oh, well, here's your email and here's your password, and it's like, well, I have a fresh login, I don't actually work for this company, etc., whatever it may be. Another one would be acting as if you're in charge. I have a few examples for each of these. So acting as if you're in charge would be like the CEO, you know, you get an email from your CEO and they're like, oh, can you transfer X amount of money to this account? And it's like, I need it by 6 p.m. today. And it's kind of like, oh, should I or shouldn't I, you know, and then you're going to have doubts, or maybe someone will do it and some person may fall for this sort of attack. Another one I have from college would be, so we do a refreshers week and the college get pizzas in and whatever, and some guy in our course, he had like a shirt on. We had presenting the projects that day, and he went over and they brought in all the Domino's pizza, and he just went up and picked up like 6 of them, and you know, walked, and no one questioned him because he looked like a lecturer and he had his badge around his neck, and you know, no one was like, oh, you can't be taking 6 of those, or you know, like he picked them up and people thought, oh, actually no, let the lecturer in. And it was funny because people thought he was a lecturer, but really he was a student. So sometimes social engineering can be a good thing. Another example, so we have next is phishing, and an example of this would be making fake websites, or you know, tricking the user into believing it's real, which is obviously what social engineering is. So an example of this phishing recently, back in about January, so just after Christmas and New Year's and all that, one of my friends posted on Twitter saying, oh, such and such a site is having a deal, and you know, it seemed like, oh, kind of a good deal, you know, and I didn't think much of it really, because you know, you're in the height of relaxing and just chilling, Christmas is gone, whatever. And then I seen another guy on Twitter retweet it, and he's verified and thousands and thousands of followers, and you're kind of like, oh, well, if he thinks it's all right, then maybe the site's all right. So I went on. Obviously, I didn't click the link through Twitter, but I did Google it, and it did come up as like 1 or 2 of the top searches. I clicked on it, and I went in, and I picked out whatever shoes or whatever it was I wanted, paid for it, but I thought it was a bit weird when I went to pay for it anyway. So I used my Revolut, a virtual Revolut card, and it kept coming up, oh, this doesn't work. So I put in my real bank to then soon find out it was actually a scam from somewhere that I won't name, but it taught me that, you know, the site was so believable that I really did think it was a legit site. So anyway, that happened, rang the bank, I told them about it, they were like, oh yeah, that's a scam, we'll cancel your card. They cancelled everything, nothing happened. My package arrived with my shoes, but they were actually socks that I had received. So it taught me, you know, you need to be wary of what you use, regardless if it has the green lock up on the side. You need to make sure the site is legit, because it looked believable, and I know myself and the other friends all made a purchase on this website. So another one would be spear phishing. So an example of this would be to target people. And I have an example of this from when I worked, or when I done my internship with EdgeScan, and I'm going to explain more about spear phishing then. So then next, oh, apologies. So next would be phishing. So this would be tricking the user to believe that, you know, something important via voice is happening. And I have an example in the video next, so I'll explain, or the video will explain this a little bit better, but to trick someone via voice and be pretending to get, you know, sensitive information or important personal information, and, you know, changing and whatever. And then baiting. So this would be an example of a USB. So, you know, when you're in the parking lot of your office and you see a USB and you pick it up and you feel, you know, curious of what's on it here, and you feel like, right, I'm going to plug this into the work laptop when I get into the office, and then you find out it's actually malware and it brings the system down, and, you know, and then you have a bigger problem. It's like, you know, people do these things, or hard drives or whatever it might be, or mobile phones, you know, stuff that's infected, and once you've plugged it into the system, it's, you know, it's run wild. So it's important for all of these. There's all different remediations or effective ways of teaching your employees as such, or just general users, students as well, like how can we stop this? And one of it being more security awareness. You know, we need to train our employees and make sure that they're all up to date with the latest attacks of such, or, you know, watching when you get that email in and it's like, oh, we've seen you doing such and such, you owe us such and such Bitcoin. And it's like, yeah, it might be true or it may not be true, but you just don't listen, or you don't read it or whatever. I've had a few emails that have been like, oh, you've just won a prize, and, you know, and it's obviously fake because my email is public on my website. And people are just email thinking, you know, oh, you've just won this. Or so you have to be conscious of, you know, be wary. Like, some people will genuinely seem genuine, and then they're not all they seem. So in my next video, or in my next slide, I'm going to show you a video of a woman. So a man asks a woman, can you hack into my, apologies, can you hack into my bank account? And basically she does a few different tactics to try and get in. So I'm going to show you. So it's 2 minutes long. I'm just going to skip a little bit through. And yeah, so here we go. So in the video, we see that how easy it is, like a crying baby and a phone call and an internet connection, and bang, you know, you've changed someone's details. So if this woman could do it with his phone provider, what can she do with his bank or any other important information? And there's a great video by Rachel Tubak, and she done a social engineering on one of the CNN employees, and basically, I'm not even going to say anything any further. Just watch it. It's scary what she does. The guy got a middle seat on the plane. Like, yeah. So I'd recommend definitely looking it up. Unfortunately, I didn't link it in because I thought it was too long. It was about 5 or 7 minutes. I can't remember exactly, but definitely one to watch if you're interested. So, moving on. Apologies. So, a quote from a famous hacker is Kevin Mitnick, and to say it's very accurate, there's just not words. So, a company can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on firewalls, intrusion detection systems, encryption, and other security technologies. But if a hacker can call one trusted person within a company, and the person complies, and if the hacker gets in, then all that money spent on technology is essentially wasted. And it's absolutely true. If you don't look after your employees and make sure they're up to date with the latest social engineering trends or security awareness, you know, having all this great technology is great, but if a hacker gets in, what can they do to all that? So, do we feel humans are a vulnerability? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like 110% humans are a vulnerability. It's great having all the technology, but if the human can't comply and, you know, make sure that the barriers are up as well, then there's no point having all this extra, you know, security as such. So going on to explain a little bit more about the human vulnerability, I could have been a vulnerability to my current company. So to give a little bit of a brief, I started an internship back in May 2019 with EdgeScan, and you know, I work part-time there now, just while I'm in college, etc. And it was great when I started. I tweeted about joining the company, really excited. You know, I was only in my second year of college, going into my third year, and to get an internship was, you know, it was great because not many other people in my course had the privilege of, or the opportunity to get it. So I tweeted about it, and then, you know, I think about a month later, I tweeted, oh, I found a bug on Twitter, and it really wasn't a bug, but it bugged me. And we tweeted about it, and, you know, like, who can I contact about it? It was kind of trivial. It just, like, it didn't really matter. So I got, like, some replies from people, you know, and it was great, and people were really helpful, and I got a few DMs like, oh, this is what you can do, there's a bug bounty, this, and this, and just tons of helpful threads. And, you know, it actually got me looking into other bug bounty programs, not just Twitter, and, you know, other kind of like a CTF or the more pen testing, etc. So, but after I posted that and people, I kind of gave up with looking more into the bug as such, even though it wasn't really a bug, but someone else was really eager to help, and, you know, the person seemed nice, so I got chatting to them. They're like, oh, you should do bug bounties, and, you know, there's great stuff. Can I have your email address and I'll send you on links? And I was like, yeah, no, it's okay. Like, I'm I'm happy you can send the links through Twitter. But anyway, he found my email address through my website and emailed me them. Didn't open them, but there was tons and tons of links. Then the guy kind of got a little bit, what's the word? He had a lot of information about me that necessarily I may have put out there, but he had definitely done a lot of, search, and he knew my date of birth, which is fine because it's publicly out there regardless. He was only short of asking me what my dog's surname was, like that kind of. He was asking, am I married, how many kids I have, where did I live, and kind of got a bit weary, and he kept going on and trying to be helpful. And then I got one message one day, and he was like, is this domain, and obviously this domain for the company that I was doing the internship with. He's like, oh, what's it used for? Obviously I didn't reply, if I had replied, would I have been the vulnerability in that sense of what could this guy do to the company, or what was he going to try? And the fact I know that he was scanning the domain, because this was a private domain, it wasn't actually public, but if you scan or whatever, it may pop up, and it kind of got me like, oh, what's on the other side that URL that he could get? And whatever this guy was targeting or out to do was kind of scary. And then another day he just kept going on asking me weird questions, and questions I kind of just didn't want to answer, and I kind of got a little bit distant and not replying and whatever. And then he sent me a message, I'm a good hacker and I'll never hack you, so don't worry. I was kind of like, now this is the time I should worry. And to be honest, when this guy reached out at first, I didn't really look at his profile. I don't want to judge people on their profile. Everyone has their own thing, and whatever. I didn't feel like the need to look up someone. Then I checked out his account, and I seen, Python hacker. And I'm still not sure on what is a Python hacker, but this guy kind of just got to the point where he'd known a little bit too much. He was very involved or engaged in liking everything I'd done, commenting, oh, you're here and you're doing this and whatever. So it kind of got to the point where, right, you're being blocked. And I felt I didn't know how to feel. I told the company, of course, and I was like, oh, this guy, and we spoke about it, and they were like, don't worry about it, block the guy, he can't really do much anyway, there was nothing for him to do. But it kind of got me thinking of, what happens if I did say or mention, oh yeah, that is a subdomain and this does do that, or what's behind here, or some people might not be as security conscious, because I'm in cybersecurity, I was a little bit more conscious of what this guy was looking for. But if there's someone like a receptionist and they don't know what you're talking about, then would they easily say, oh, this is what this is for? And then you kind of, that kind of gets you like, oh, yikes. So it got me thinking, and I started delving into this area more and seeing more about this sort of stuff. And I came across on Twitter, Rachel posted about a woman, or someone leaked an email and a password. So you can see here, social engineering can find your usernames on social medias and platforms or during their engagements. So in this picture, so I've just ballooned it up a little bit more, and here it is. So you can see someone added the person, but it also had the email and the password. Now obviously it was covered for protection, but the company or the employee had posted the password in the email, and anyone could have logged in. That's a vulnerability in itself. Like, this is a massive company as well, so yeah, it's a massive vulnerability. Then another one we have is, apologies. Another one we have, I have a video here now of a guy who social engineers his way into an arena for a football match, and this would be an example of act as if you're in charge. So this would be one of the social engineering attacks. So I'm just going to play it now. It's about 1 minute long.
Here we are outside Yokohama, Japan's international stadium, where the Rugby World Cup final is, and I don't fancy paying. Let's go. Step 1, get yourself a blazer coat or whatever, something that looks smart, it's quite long, makes you look the part. Do it up. Step 2, get yourself a security earpiece. Over that light, isn't it? Yeah. Number 3, act like you own the place.
So if you watch coming up here, the guy on the right is going to salute him and let him through. So not one person questioned him of who he was and what he was doing. And to just look, like, there are only brief examples. There's many, many more. Like, I've seen some with leaked S3 bucket credentials, etc. And you might not think it's much, but it's massive if you have a big organization or wherever the data may be behind. So what did these real life examples tell us? Well, my own example taught me that you need to be wary of who you talk online and how much information you're willing to share, or when you draw the line of saying yes or no or responding or etc. And then the leaked credentials and emails is a lack of observation. If people are going to post these sort of things, it's like posting a picture of your registration of your car, or you're always going to try and blur it out or scribble it out. You don't want people knowing that sort of information regardless. Even if you live in the same state, that's different, but you're going to always try and protect as much information that you put out there. But then the guy walking into the arena, like, what does that teach us? Well, obviously it's genius at first. Acting as if you're in charge is a massive social engineering attack. It happens everywhere. Most people, if you're confident enough, you'll get in. Like, you'll manipulate the guards by your luck, your confidence, having the extra earpiece just to show, oh, I'm in charge, or showing people that you know what you're doing, or it's a great skill. So looking back at these, and they're only short and very basic, but is it important to invest adequate cyber awareness training for employees? And like, my only answer is absolutely. Like, if you don't make sure your employees are up to scratch and up to date with just security awareness in general, what else could happen to your company? Like, as Kevin Mitnick's quote goes, you could have absolutely every technology under the sun and it could be all secure, but if your human is the barrier that stops someone breaking in and hacking your company, it's very important to make sure we can look after our employees and make sure that there is training and there is skills, and everyone's aware. So leaving you on a quote today, going off the talk, is we can patch our software, but we can't patch humans. So if the human makes a mistake, we can give them all the awareness training we want, but will they listen and take it in is another thing. Will they act on it? Will they do it? Or you patch your software, it's not going to break again, or it may break, but you can patch it again. And it's not a case of you're patching software every day, every week. Humans, it's kind of an ongoing thing. So we've DocMac stuff and the toy patcher. So yeah. So if you want to learn more about social engineering and more in depth, I do recommend following Rachel, Jenny, and Lisa. Very intelligent people, and they're all into social engineering. Like, they all have great skill sets. This is what they do as a career. Unfortunately, like, I'm still in college, I'm still learning, so this talk was a little bit probably too basic for people. But I am learning, and I'm still learning from these three people, awesome people to learn from as well, but to follow on Twitter as well. So with that said, I would like to thank you for listening. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter and I'm on LinkedIn. And I'm always happy if people want to reach out and ask questions. I love chatting things, CTF, social engineering, you name it. I'm still learning, so hopefully when you come to me, I won't be an expert in the field, but I'll be definitely willing to share and help. So again, I'd like to thank the guys from the DEF CON Delhi chapter for having me on, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for having me at the DEF CON Delhi security conference. So this talk is going to be about Docker for bug bounty hunting and penetration testing in general. All right, now before we actually get started with anything, I just want to clear up a few things regarding what I'll be covering in this video. So of course, I'll be taking you through setting up Docker on Linux and the various commands that will help you get started and effective. So we'll be talking about the tools and the environment, and then we'll move on to setting up a hacking lab with Docker. And again, I'll show you how to use various toolkits that you can use for your bug bounty assessments and any of your penetration tests. All right, so let's get started. First of all, if anyone of you has never heard of Docker or hasn't used it, Docker is essentially a system that allows you to build and deploy applications and services in the form of containers, right? So an easy way of looking at this is comparing it to your typical hypervisor like VirtualBox, where you have virtual machines. So I'll get to the comparison in a second. So it is a platform as a service offering that utilizes the host operating system kernel, as opposed to typical hypervisors like VMware and VirtualBox, right? So instead of actually utilizing VMs and the typical VM infrastructure, they all of the containers, which is the name of the actual virtual machines or the isolated VMs, all use the host operating system kernel. This will become much easier to understand in a second. So the containers are what you would call like VM templates or VMs, right? So the containers contain the dependencies and the libraries that the application or service needs to run, therefore eliminating the need for installing dependencies and managing the operating system or managing an entire other operating system. And Docker containers are much more efficient than VMs, as they utilize the host kernel as opposed to virtualizing an entire other operating system. So just to explain this really simply, let me just take you through a bit of a history with hypervisors and virtualization technology, just to show you how great Docker is. So let's start off with a simple example where, if you're usually in the early 90s, the early 2000s and the late 90s, companies started utilizing applications, it could be mail servers, hosting their own websites, web applications, so on and so forth. And so companies started migrating or started utilizing the internet for business, right? Which meant they now needed to buy servers so that they could host these applications, the mail servers, so on and so forth. So typically what would happen is that the IT team would look around for servers that they would want, and they would buy an entire server rack, and based on their requirements of the application, they would then buy one with the appropriate resources. But in many cases, what happened is they would buy a much more powerful server than they actually needed, and what would happen is that utilization would remain low throughout its lifespan, and the application would only account for maybe 5 or 10% of the overall system resources. So people would always buy things or servers that were more powerful, because it was really difficult to predict load and what type of load you'll be expecting. So people would always buy the most expensive and the most beefed up versions. And the obvious problem here is that there was underutilization of these resources, because these servers would essentially just sit in the server room or in a closet somewhere, and they would only be running one application. So this was highly inefficient. So that's where companies like VMware and later on VirtualBox from Oracle came in, and they introduced hypervisor technology, which allowed you to host more than one operating system, which means you can now host more than one application on the same server, which was really great, because now they could host their mail server, they could then host their web application, and again, you could host a Linux box, you could host a Windows box. So for example, if they were running their mail exchange service on Windows server, they could host a VM with Windows server, and if they were running their mail server using Ubuntu, they could host that separately. And that means that system resources were now being utilized much better than they were before. However, the obvious issue here, or the obvious problem, was that with these hypervisor solutions like VMware and VirtualBox, you had to virtualize another operating system, which means those resources, or half the resources, will be consumed by that other operating system and then the rest is left to the application. So for example, if we take a look at this image here, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here we have our containerized applications, and I'm talking about Docker, and the other containerized solutions are LXC, which is Linux containers. And here you have your typical hypervisor infrastructure, which you can now understand what I'm saying. So you have your hardware infrastructure, and then you have your hypervisor, which is VirtualBox or VMware, and this is obviously running on the host operating system. And then you have your virtual machines. Now the problem is quite obvious here. You can see that the guest operating system that you're virtualizing is taking up more than half of the resources that you've allocated to that virtual machine. So for example, if you were hosting a Windows 7 VM, half of it would go to hosting the operating system, and the rest will be left to the application. So that's highly inefficient, because the app then is left with what's left over. And again, this was another form of inefficiency that many people were talking about, because you essentially had to host entire other operating systems, and then what comes with that is the additional cost of licensing for these other operating systems, and then you need to manage those operating systems. You need to have administrators constantly patching them, so on and so forth. Now with Docker, what you have is you have your hardware infrastructure, you then have your host operating system. In this case, in the case of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about Linux. You can run Docker on Windows to host Windows containerized applications, but that's beyond the scope of this talk. And so again, you have your host operating system, which can be Ubuntu, Fedora, it really doesn't matter. And then you have Docker, right? Docker runs, the Docker daemon runs right over here on top of the host operating system. And then you have your containerized applications that are all using the host operating system, right? So they're all utilizing the host kernel right over here, which means you do not have to virtualize entire operating systems. So what does that mean? That means, number one, they're faster loading speeds and startup speeds. Secondly, much better system resource consumption and utilization. And you can see in the case of these two, both of these setups have the same hardware infrastructure and configuration, which means, for example, they both have 8 gigs of RAM, dual core CPU, and you can see that in the case of containers, you can run more. You can actually run twice the amount of containerized applications than you can VMs with the same configuration. So it's a much improved efficiency. Now that we understand the difference between Docker and traditional hypervisors, we can actually start taking a look at the advantages of using Docker for pen testing and bug bounty hunting. Right. So as I've mentioned, Docker works on Linux, Windows, Mac OS. So it provides you a multi-platform solution or base for running containers. So you can run your tools and environments on multiple operating systems. And because of the ability to containerize configurations and to have the containerized systems, you now have the Kali Linux and ParrotOS images, and I'll talk about the difference between images and containers in a second, with full repository support, which means you can easily set up multiple instances of Kali and Parrot, and set them up with your own configuration. You then also have your containerized vulnerable web applications like the OASP Shop, the DAM vulnerable web application that can be used for training and learning. Right, so you can easily set them up for students if you're currently hosting a CTF, and this will all become apparent when we take a look at the practical aspect here. All right, you then have your pen testing and bug bounty toolkits, which I currently set up. And the reason I set up a bug bounty toolkit for myself with Docker is because whenever I'm performing a penetration test, I usually set up a cloud instance, which means I want the exact same configuration of tools wherever or whenever I set up a new cloud instance. And it was really becoming quite cumbersome installing all the tools manually. Even if I created a bash script to install them, it was really inconvenient because in one event, one application or one script would require a few more dependencies if it was updated. So I was, and around this time I was also using Linux containers quite a bit, and I really liked the application of containerizing environments that you can then deploy on multiple computers, and it will remain the exact same in terms of functionality. You won't have to do anything else. You just plug and play and you have the exact same toolkit that you had on your laptop at home, right? And then winding off, Docker is extremely resource efficient, and the tools and images can be easily updated and pushed to all the users who use them. All right, so that concludes the presentation aspect. I'm not going to get started with the practical demonstration, so I'm just going to bring up my VM here, and we'll go into my terminal. So I'm currently running this on a VPS, and the reason for that is because there's much faster internet speed. So again, getting started, we first want to take a look at installing Docker and then enabling the service. So let's do that right now. So I'm currently running Ubuntu here, and you can see my kernel version is version 4.15. This is Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. And let me just clear this up, and I'll increase the size of the font here so that everything is visible clearly. All right, so to install it, we use the aptitude package manager. So you can also use pacman if you're using an Arch-based distribution. So apt install, docker.io, right? And you want to hit enter, and I already have it installed. The second thing you need to do is you need to enable and start the service so that the Docker daemon is running. All right, so we use system control, and you can then say enable Docker, and I hit enter, and Docker is already enabled on my system, so that means it'll run at startup. I highly recommend that you do this if you start using Docker regularly, and then I want to start the service, and then I can say system control status Docker, right? And that gives me the status of the Docker service. You can currently see that it's active, it's loaded and active, and it's running. So that means we can now utilize Docker. All right, so I'll take you through the essentials now. So first of all, let's talk about Docker images and containers, right? So Docker images are essentially just your VM templates, right? So these are environments that are pre-built and can be easily downloaded and then, you know, turned into containers, right? So again, you can find Docker images on the Docker Hub, right? So the Docker Hub is like a repository for all, you know, Docker images that are publicly available. So for example, if I wanted to look for the Ubuntu Docker image, I would simply search for Ubuntu. If I wanted to run a container running Ubuntu, I just hit Ubuntu here, and that will take me to the official Ubuntu Docker page here on the Docker Hub, and it gives me instructions on how to pull this Docker image, right? So let's talk about that right now. So as I said, we have Docker images and we have Docker containers. To view your Docker images, we type in Docker images, right? And that gives me a list of all the images that I have. You can look at your Docker images as ISO files, right? Or installation files for VMs, except they're already pre-configured and you don't have to do anything at all. So a better example or a better analogy of looking at is looking at Docker images as OVA or OVF files for VirtualBox, right? So you just set them up and it's much faster. It immediately sets up the container and you now have an environment. So in my case, I have OWASP Juice Shop, Kali Linux rolling, the bug bounty toolkit that I created, ParrotSec or ParrotOS, and the damn vulnerable web application. All right, so these are the images that I can use to create containers, right? And to do that, if I list my current containers that I have running, and to do that, I type in docker PSA, you can see we have 0 containers currently running, which are your VMs now, but nothing is running. And the important thing to take a look at when you're taking a look at your images is you have your repository name and the image ID. So the image ID is a unique identifier that will also be there with containers. You'll have unique container IDs. This will allow you to uniquely identify your images because you can also install various versions of images. So for example, if I say Docker pull, and I'm pulling from the Docker Hub repository, so I say Docker pull, if I say Ubuntu and I hit enter, that's going to pull the latest version of Ubuntu, right? So I'm just going to wait for that to pull, and there we are. So now if I say Docker images to list my images, you can see we have Ubuntu, and this is running the latest version, which is 20.04. If I want to pull version 16.04, I can also do that by saying Docker pull Ubuntu 16.04. And to do that, I would need to use the colon here. So 16.04, and I hit enter, and that's going to pull Ubuntu version 16.04, which means I now have 2 versions that I can set up. All right, so again, Docker images. Let's say I want to run a container, for Ubuntu 16.04. So I'll just copy the image ID here, the unique image identifier. And to get started, if I want to run a container from an image, I simply type in docker run, and then I specify various arguments. So in the case of Ubuntu, this is an environment that I can actually interact with using an interactive terminal or a TTY session. So to specify that I want to interact with this container through a terminal, I type in IT, so that means interactive session, and then I can specify a name for this container. In this case, I'll just call it test, right? And then I specify the container, the image ID, which I just paste in, and then I specify the shell that I want to use. In this case, is going to be bash. I'll just specify the absolute route to bash, and I hit enter, and you will see now that I'm currently logged in on that container. So this is the Ubuntu container, and I can confirm that by typing in cat etc issue, and you can see it's running Ubuntu 16.04 LTS. So I'm currently in that container, and now because I'm in that container, I can do whatever I want, and this is essentially like a VM, right? And the interesting thing is, remember, it's sharing my host operating system kernel. So it's sharing my host OS kernel, which is version 4.15. Okay, so now I can do, pretty much whatever I want, and it's a fully isolated container or a VM, which means anything I do in here doesn't affect the system. And it's currently persistent, which means this container is going to be saved, and any work that I've done, any files that I've stored on it will be available. So for example, if I just go into my home directory and I say vim test.txt, and I don't have vim installed, so I'll just install that apt. So I'll say apt update and apt upgrade. Let me just upgrade my packages as well. Sorry. Let me just correct that command here. There we are. And then I'll install vim in a second here, and we'll just create a file with a bit of content. So there we are. Just run an upgrade here. That's going to upgrade any of the packages. There we are. And now I can say apt install vim, and that's going to take about 54 megabytes. That's fine. That's going to set up vim for me now, and there we are. I'll just run the previous command where I created the file, and I'll just say this is some text data, and I'll save that. And now when I want to exit from a container, I hit exit, right? And that's going to take me back to my host operating system. So now that we've talked about images, now we have our containers, and to list our containers, we say docker psa, and you can now see, if I reduce my font size, the container is listed here. And remember, we gave it a name, and the name is also specified. So it gives us the container ID and the image that was used to create this container, and the command that we ran with it, which is bin bash, and the status. This is very important. The status tells you whether the container is currently running or is in an exited state, which means it's shut down. In our case, you can see it's telling us that the container is in an exited state, which means it's currently not running. And again, if we want to start up the container again, we say docker. Now we specify the container option. So docker container start, and then we specify the name of the container, or you can specify the container ID. We hit enter. That's going to start it, right? But it's not going to take us into that container or log us into that container. However, if we hit docker psa, you can now see the status is telling us that it's up, right? And it gives you the history of how long it's been up. In this case, it's 9 seconds. If we hit it again, it's now 17 seconds, so on and so forth. So the container is currently running. And to attach ourselves to it, or to log in, or to actually get a terminal session, we need to say docker container attach. Sorry, that is attach here. And we specify the name of the container or the container ID, and that is going to log us in. There we are. So now again, we can check the directory, the home directory where I created the test file, and there we are. You can now see we have the test.txt file that we created. So the changes have been persisted, right? And again, you can also create containers that you can use one time, and then after you're done, or once you exit from the container, it actually just deletes the container for you. And to do that, we use the docker rm command. So again, if I just want to delete this container, so I say docker remove or rm, and I say test, right? And that's going to exit. So now if I list my containers, you can now see we have no containers running. All right. Now that we have that done, we can actually start taking a look at various tools that we can set up now that we understand the basics of using it. So first of all, I want to start off with Kali, and you can find Kali on the Docker Hub. All you need to do is type in Kali, and you're typically looking for the rolling version, which has the latest repositories. Again, so to pull it, you just copy the docker pull command here. And since I already have it pulled, or because it's actually updated, so I'll just pull it one more time just to make sure that I have the latest image. Yeah, so I do have the latest image. So again, running it is very simple. It's very similar to Ubuntu. We simply say run. And now because I want to delete the container once I'm done, I specify IT for an interactive terminal, and then I specify RM. That will ensure that the container is deleted once it's in an exited state, right? And then I specify the Kali Linux image, right? So let me just get the ID of the image, which is right over here. So that is the unique image ID. So docker run IT RM, and I will then want to specify a name here. So again, I'll just specify name, and we'll just say this is a test, and we'll specify the ID and bin bash, right? And I hit enter, and there we are. So now we are currently in the Kali box, and again, I can confirm this by saying cat etc issue. Apologies for that. There we are, cat etc issue, and we're currently running Kali Linux rolling edition. So now that we have access to the Kali repositories, this Kali image doesn't have any tools installed, so you need to configure it to your to what you would prefer. So again, I can say, you know, apt update, and then I can install all the tools that I want, for example. And this is the great thing about running Docker, is the images are lightweight, and you can set up only the tools that you're going to use. So apt install, let's say I wanted to install a few bug bounty tools. I can say I want nmap. Let's see, we can install FIES as well, DNS enum, and we have GoBuster. And this is the great thing of having the Kali repositories, is you can install all of these tools with one click. And if you run it on a VPS, the internet connection is extremely fast, and you can set all of these tools up relatively quickly. All right, so I'll wait for this to install. So it's installing quite a few tools, and you can see how easy it is for me to set up an instance with all the tools that I need. But this is still cumbersome because I need to install them. So again, if we type in GoBuster, that works. And maybe I wanted to install something like WordPress scan, and you can see it's extremely easy. I don't need to do any setup, install any dependencies. The repositories automatically do that for me. And there we are. It just takes a few seconds. And now I have an environment that I can use, and one that is tailored to what I need, as opposed to, you know, a system that has tools that you probably will not use or will rarely end up using. So there we are. So that's how to use Kali. Now, because I specified the RM option, you can now see that after the container is in an exited state, it is currently not running, which is what it's currently not running. And it got deleted, which is exactly what we want. We don't want a persistent session of a box that we used for pen testing. So let's talk about ParrotOS. ParrotOS comes with a few tools. As you can see, the size is huge. It's about 4.7 gigs. And again, to run it, we can run the previous command and just remove the Kali ID here and replace it with the ParrotOS image ID. So there we are, we hit enter, and we're now in ParrotOS, and we get the familiar ParrotOS terminal. And we can now, because I think we have the tools installed, nmap is available. We have WordPress scan also set up, so we'll wait for that to load. And there we are. Joom scan, do we have a GoBuster? Let's see if we have GoBuster. So we don't have GoBuster installed. So you might have to install the tools that are currently missing, but Parrot has done a very good job. I'll give them credit. They've done a better job than Kali, because Kali doesn't install anything for you, which I understand. They actually use this for, custom images and solutions that, you might want to use if you're hosting a CTF and you want to install only a certain or specific tools. So again, ParrotOS is quite good. You have access to the Parrot repos. Let's see if we have GoBuster here. So apt, I'm not really sure whether the ParrotOS has the Parrot. Yeah, so you can see in the case of the Parrot of ParrotOS, I've actually updated my repositories here. Let me just update the Parrot repositories, because I think it does have GoBuster. There we are. Yes, so it does have GoBuster. So again, you can install the tools that are currently missing. And both the Kali and the ParrotOS repositories are extremely useful, and they have multiple tools that you can use to set up your own environment and use in pen tests or bug bounty assessments. And it's much better because, for example, in my case, I can have all my tools running in one terminal, and then of course I can run my proxy, which is burp or OWASP shop on the host operating system, and I don't need to use any VMs or anything, you know, like that will take up huge amounts of system resources. So this is quite excellent that way. All right, now let's take a look at the bug bounty toolkit, which is the toolkit that I set up and has all of the tools that you'd use in a bug bounty assessment or when you're performing bug bounty hunting. And you can find this on this repository here. So github.com, Alexis Ahmed, and bug bounty toolkit. And again, you can pull the image. You also have the Docker file on my repository, so you can customize the Docker file. The Docker file essentially just contains all the instructions to build the Docker image. So you can see it contains all the tool installation and dependency setups. So again, you can also find this on the Docker Hub. So bug bounty toolkit. I'll just search for it here. It should be the first option. There we are, hack exploit bug bounty toolkit. And it was just updated a few days ago, and this is the list of tools that it currently has. So you know, bucket finder, DNS recon, dir search, mass DNS, Nikto, recon ng, all set up and ready to go. So I already have the latest version, but I'll just pull it one more time, and we can then start talking about the pen testing environments and setting up your own virtual hacking lab. All right, so now that we have the image, I say Docker images, sorry. My apologies, my keyboard is right in front of my microphone here. So Docker images, and there we are. We have the bug bounty toolkit, so I'll just copy that. So Docker run, I'll just specify the IT option first, and then RM, and we specify the name or the image ID here, and that is IT, and we specify bin bash. I also have a Z shell or these ZSH. So again, bin bash, there we are, and we're now in the bug bounty toolkit. So if I list my current home directory, you can see we have the toolkit directory. I also have the seclist word list configured. So again, if I can run any of the tools that you typically use for bug bounty. So dir search, for example, recon ng is fully set up and can be used without any dependencies needing to be installed. There we are. Also have nmap setup, Nikto, and all of the other tools that you can check out. So again, you can see there's no end to the environments that you can set up with the tools that you require, and there's multiple toolkits out there, you know, for various things like Android pen testing, reverse engineering of Android applications. So all, you know, tools like APK tool, so on and so forth. Right, so you can see we have plenty of environments that you can set up. Now, the real power of Docker comes from DevOps, right? Because this is where Docker is usually deployed the most. So, you know, DevOps companies or companies that develop web applications, the problem that they usually had was when they sell these web applications to companies, they need to also send installation instructions and setup instructions. Most of you already know this. So, let's say I want to buy a web application for my business, and let's say it is a reservations booking system, and so what will happen is the developer will send me a whole list of instructions or installation instructions that need to be done before I can actually set that web app up. You know, stuff like installing PHP, MySQL, Apache, you know, essentially setting up the LAMP stack and then installing all the dependencies, which is extremely cumbersome for customers or clients because it can become, you know, extremely difficult for them to set it up, and they often then have to get the developer to set it up for them, and this wastes the developer's time, and the developer then has to, you know, communicate with the client, and this becomes a real mess. So Docker has really shined in the DevOps community because you can essentially build a Docker image once with all the dependencies that the application needs, and you can deploy it 1,000,000 times without having to set up a single thing. Now, a common example of this is, of course, vulnerable web applications, right? So, for example, OWASP Juice Shop, and you can find all the vulnerable web applications under OWASP.org, under Project Vulnerable Web Applications directory, and you have a list of all of them. So you have offline, the online version, so you have the OWASP NetGoat, CloudGoat, like you have tons of them that you can set up to learn bug bounty hunting, to also, you know, set up CTFs. And in the case of OWASP Juice Shop, you need to install a few, you know, quite a few dependencies. So again, it becomes quite cumbersome setting it up over and over. And you know, when you're learning, the last thing you want to be doing is taking, you know, more than 1 hour setting up your environment, right? So again, it really is very, very simple. All you need to do is say, you know, docker pull, just pull the image, and then right at the bottom here of the repository, it gives you instructions on actually deploying it with Docker. And in this case, we'll also be exposing this image to the internet through a particular port because it's running a web application. And with Docker images that host web applications as opposed to entire systems, you don't need to interact with them via terminal, because all you need to do is just run them once. And once they're running, you then, you know, because you're exposing the IP onto the internet, you can easily then access it through a URL like so. So again, I'll just pull the image and I'll show you this right now. As opposed to installing, you know, all the dependencies, setting up a LAMP stack, this is how easy it is to do it with Docker. So I pull the image, I say Docker images, and I have the juice shop right over there. I just copy it. So I say Docker run, and then I specify RM. So I want to delete the container once I'm done, or once this is an exited state. And then I specify my port options, right? So the port options are quite simple to understand. The first port that you specify is your local port, so on what interface you're binding to on your host operating system. And then the second port is going to be the container port that you want to expose. In the case of OS View Shop, the recommended port is 3000 on both ends. So we say 3000, and we then specify the Docker ID, image ID, and hit enter. All right, so we'll wait for that. And it's going to say all dependencies are satisfied. So it gives us some output and tells us the server is now listening on port 3000. All right, so now to test this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my server IP. And again, I can do that really simply. Let me just do that right now. All right, so I have my server IP address, and this is just a VPS, so that will not be available. Once I'm done with it, I'll just delete it after. So again, I'll just hit in the IP here and the port 3000, and there we are. OS View Shop is set up without installing any dependencies, doing any of the, you know, configuration and all of the, you know, all of the deployment, you know, deployment techniques, and, you know, installing dependencies, setting up the database. And I immediately can host this for a CTF, or if I want to learn about specific vulnerabilities, I can set this up multiple times, right? So I can also set up multiple other containers on other ports. For example, if I go back to my terminal here, and let's say I close this, but before I do that, I want to run this in a detached state. So if I list my my current containers, you see I've exited from the container. So if I reload this, you'll see that this will not be active now. So let's say I also want to run the same image under the port 3000 on a and I want to run it in a detached mode so that the container is left running, and I can also deploy other images. So I can say docker run, specify in a detached mode, and that's going to run it. And now once it's set up, I should be able to access it. So we'll give it a few seconds to set up the environment, because it does need to set up various options in the background. So there we are. And OS View Shop is now running. And then I can also run my other images like Kali if I'm using the tools there. So I can say docker run, and again I can then run the Kali image or ParrotOS, for example. So docker run, and I can say it rm, paste that in there, bin, and bash. And now I can run multiple containers at the same time. So you can see I'm currently running Parrot, and I'm also running OS View Shop. So it really is fantastic and much more efficient than running multiple VMs, right? So again, I can use this, and when I'm done, I just hit exit, and that container is not persistent, so it gets deleted immediately. I don't need to do anything else. And there we are. So again, the Docker OS View Shop container is running. So again, I can just get the container ID, and they say docker container stop, paste in the ID, and I hit enter, and now that container has been deleted because I stopped it, and now OS View Shop is not running anymore. So it really is quite awesome. All right, that being said, let's take a look at one more other vulnerable environment here, Docker images, and how to set it up, which is the damn vulnerable web application, which really is fantastic. So I'll just search for it right over here, and I'll also show you a few other awesome things you can do with the Docker Hub before we conclude this presentation. So DVWA, right? And I just hit enter, and you have plenty of images that have been set up by many people. So again, if we click on this one right here, which is the one I use, you can see it gives you options as to how you can run it. You can also specify or change the MySQL password. So running it is very, very simple. We need to run it in a detached mode and then specify the port. So again, I'll just say, we'll just say docker run, and I'll just copy the image ID for the damn vulnerable web application here, and I'll say this is going to be in detached mode, and I want to get rid of this container when I'm done, and then specify the port. So before I actually paste in the ID here, I'll just specify the port. So we're exposing port 80 and port 80 there, and we then specify the image ID, and just confirm that that's the way to deploy it. And you can also again then expose the MySQL database if you're going to be attacking that as well. So I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to run in the background. So docker psa, you can see it's been up for 2 seconds, and it's exposed on your server port right there. So again, if we just load this on port 80 now, just going to hit enter. We're going to give that a few seconds, and there we are. Damn vulnerable web application is already set up, and it's now asking us to create or reset the database. So I'm just going to say create here, and it's going to say the database was created, and we can now log in to the damn vulnerable web application. I'm just going to log in with the default credentials, and I believe they are admin and password, and immediately we have set up a vulnerable web application that we can use for lessons, for learning about vulnerabilities. So for example, command injection. Let's see, if I want to run a few commands here, I can say cat etc password, and you can see it's telling us we've entered the incorrect IP. So if we modify the security here, I just want to demonstrate that you can actually perform these, you can test these vulnerabilities with a high amount of security. So again, we can then say, run the following command cat etc password to display the password file, and there we are. So you can really use Docker in multiple ways for bug bounty hunting and pen testing. In this particular presentation, I've just gone over how to set it up, for how to set up your environment, your tools. And then, of course, I've been talking about how to set up, your vulnerable environments that, again, you can use for lessons and many other things. So again, you have access to multiple vulnerabilities here, file inclusion. Again, so you can click on file 1, and then again, it tells you your IP and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. All right, so thank you very much for having me during this presentation. I really appreciate the welcome. And again, if you have any questions regarding this presentation, you can reach me on Twitter under Hackesploit, and that is you can reach me there and send me any of your messages. If you have any questions, again, you can reach me on my Twitter handle, which is Hackesploit. And thank you very much for watching this presentation. And yeah, have a great day.